Okay, hello everyone. I guess we can start now. So the important thing is that you update your nickname on Zoom to your name, your country, and your level, so I can check it off the attendance list. Okay, so I guess I'll just start now. So welcome to Singapore, Indonesia, and Thailand SNC Policy Update Conference. Wanted to welcome you all guys back to our conference, and I think tabletop has been started soon, or started in some countries. I know Singapore, there are really quite some tournaments, and we are all waiting for the SEA Championship tournaments. So go to the next slide, which is so for the SEA Championship qualifiers, Oracle Events is looking for judges who are looking for advancement to put you as priority for staffing events. So we have come to have a couple of what's it called, tangible milestones for you to hit. So basically, they are all based off the modules in Judge Academy. So the first one is for L1s, you need to have all modules of ComRel completed. This is to prepare you for competitive REL, because the qualifiers will be run at competitive REL, and you additionally you should do 10 other modules or get a level 2 plus endorsement to move up to level 2. So for the level 2s, it is fine if you want to stay as level 2, right? So of course, we will need you to complete all 6 modules of level 2 event management, or complete one L3 quality with the associated self-review. So I think at the moment, L3 qualities, there are 7 right now. You just need to do the entire role and the associated self-review, and you will take it as you're looking for advancement. So the next one, as usual, there will be a quiz again. Yay. And we have 10 questions. You need 80% to get correct, or 8 out of 10. And I think after this little chat, we will have a photo taking to submit to Nicolette of Judge Academy, so that and we can also use it to take your attendance. And of course, one has given a lot of names for those who did not fulfill their requirements, which is to pass the quiz, attend the policy update for SNC by WeiJia, and you have to also attend 2 more seminars, all of the other 3 seminars later. So a couple of things I will okay, I will put the link for the live, YouTube live right now. And when the presentation is going on, try not to spam the chat unless it is for asking questions or replying to what the presenter is talking about. That'll be great, so that we will not spam the chat, and then the presenter needs to scroll way back to find a question. So unfortunately, there's something that Zoom limitation. Pass it over to WeiJia for the SNC Policy Conference update. WeiJia, over to you.
Thanks, CJ. Hello, everyone. Hope you guys have been doing well. It's been, I think, about a few months since we last met in the last conference, for the online conference, for that matter, for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So this time around, we are going to take another planeswalk into a very, very interesting concept that WotC just came up with. That's New Capenna. New Capenna is very, very interesting in general for me, because that it has very interesting mechanics, and at the same time it has it mixes very old, how do I call it, noir style. If you have played the game noir before, is a very post World War II era, 1960, that kind of like Cold War era kind of thing. together with mafias and such. So it's really, really interesting. So I really like the way that they presented this this expansion thus far. And it is one of the and some of the mechanics I've seen is actually really, really fresh and original. So let's get to it. So right now it's Q2. So fast, right? It's like 2022. One moment we are already talking about Kamigawa. The next moment, boom, we are right here in New Capenna already. And pretty soon enough in Q3, we are back in physical. I don't know. Maybe one day we'll be back in physical conference or something. Let's see how it goes. So anyway, let's get to it. So policy and rules update for this time around for New Capenna. We have some slew of new mechanics that are coming back in this time around. And at the same time, we also have some returning mechanics, which which has a little bit of changes in the middle. So let's start off with the first one. So every new mechanic, what C has actually done was that every new mechanic is tied to a specific house. So the first one that was quite interesting is called Connive. So Connive is actually by is a signature move by Obscura, members of the Obscura team. So the Obscura house is actually the Esper, if I remember correctly, which is a white, blue, black family. And they use, in the law, they use magic to manipulate and distract. And they're always looking for a more advantageous position, which is why you see that sometimes you see the Merfolk Looter effect, which you draw a card and then you discard a card. And what happens in this area is that if a creature you control is instructed to connive, you first draw the card and discard a card. And this maybe might help you find the land you need, or later in the game they might let you trade away an unneeded land to get your end game cards, for example. But if you discard a non-land card in this case, you put a +1/+1 counter on the creature that actually connive. And one interesting thing is that a creature can connive, and even if it's still not on the battlefield. So like for example, Ledger's Treasure here, if for example, if for some reason he gets destroyed in response to his own triggered ability, you still get to draw and discard. And once this ability, why this happens is because once this ability causes a creature to connive starts to resolve, no player can take any other actions until it's done. It's the same thing as any kind of resolution of a spell or ability, and nobody can take any actions until the entire string of instructions is completed. And of course, you can't try to remove that conniving creature after you discard the non-land card. But you can do it before it receives a counter. And I think the other thing that also you would like to take note is that there are some times where you see, like for example, the Sphinx, it gives you connive X. Usually it's just connive, but sometimes there is a variant, it's a special variant called connive X. So what happens is that connive X means that its controller will draw X cards and discard X cards. And you put a number of +1/+1 counter on that permanent equal to the number of non-land cards you discard this way. So if, for example, some effect only allows you to discard only one card, but connive is like connive 2, then you only put 1 +1/+1 counter instead of 2 +1/+1 counters. So that's something to take note. Pretty straightforward, nothing much to it. So that is one of the families. So let me introduce you to another family, which I think you might be quite familiar with, which is under Obnixilis as well, under his new rule and leadership. So they are otherwise known as the Maestros. So the Maestros are a blue-black-red family, and their signature mechanic here is called Casualty. And the members of these so-called elite society, they appreciate no finer art than the art of the kill. That means, as you can see, Casualty is really just killing off people, killing off your underlings for that matter. So why I say the underlings, because it is actually Casualty X is a ability. It represents two ability. One is a static and one is a trigger ability. But both they are grouped under this ability called Casualty. And it is an additional cost to cast a spell. So if you choose to cast the cost with this casualty on it, you may sacrifice an underling, I guess, and so basically a creature with power N or greater. So where the N is basically the X, as you see right here. So and where then if you choose to do so, then that trigger ability triggers and copies that spell. And if that original spell requires any target, you get to choose the new targets as well. So if you want to target another creature altogether, why not? And of course, the copy is created directly on the stack. So it is not cast, but it's still a spell on the stack. That means you still can respond to it, you still can counter it as per normal, and it will actually resolve before the original spell happens. And of course, there's one more important thing that you want to note is that as in a casualty, every instance of a casualty ability, you can only ever sacrifice one creature. So you can't actually say that if it's casualty 2, you can sacrifice 2/1/1 creatures, but you can sacrifice only one, maybe say a 2/1 creature or a 3/1 creature, for example. So yeah, as bloodthirsty as you may want to be, you cannot keep sacrificing so many instances of creatures. Yeah, there's a limit to it. So and that's pretty much it for casualty. It's quite straightforward as well. So I'm going to move on to the next one, which is the Riveteers. So Riveteers have a very interesting ability, which is called Blitz. So why Blitz is because their signature mechanic is being very fast, very hit fast, hit hard, and then they get out before anyone knows that they are there. So what is Blitz in actual MTG? So basically, it's an alternative cost. It comprises of actually not 3, but in fact, it's actually 4 abilities. So why I say this is because if you read if you read the CR the next time around, you will see that it's broken down into, they say it's broken down into 3 abilities, but there's actually one more ability that goes into it. So there are 2 static abilities, 1 triggered ability, and then later there is a bonus triggered ability coming from the first static ability that you see right here. So the first static ability says that you may cast this card for its Blitz cost, Blitz cost rather than its mana cost. That is the alternative. The second static ability is as long as this permanent's Blitz cost is paid, it gains haste. And the third one is triggered ability is when this permanent is put to graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. So what happens if you cast this card for its Blitz cost, the second bonus delayed trigger ability will happen. So what this will do is that if this permanent Blitz cost was paid, then you have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So while all this is happening, the entire total mana value of the card does not change. So there's something to keep in mind as well. And the other thing is that if you cast the spell for its Blitz cost, the creature gains haste. And when it dies, it draws a card, and you won't have to wait too long for it anyway, because you still have to sacrifice it. And and if it doesn't survive combat, you get the card in time to cast in your second main phase. And the creature doesn't have to make it all the way to the end step to be sacrificed either. So if it gets bounced, but one thing that you want to take note is that if it gets bounced or exiled, you won't get to draw that card. So so that's pretty much it. Moving on to the next family, which is the Cabaretti, which is also the most I'll touch on Blitz more later in the later examples. So I'm moving on to the Cabaretti. It's actually Alliance. So Alliance is basically just a triggered ability. So this is their signature mechanic because they are really all about their connections. And Alliance is really just an ability word that just highlights like a certain trigger ability. So it just basically says like Alliance dash and then a triggered ability. So nothing much to it. I think it's just really just trying to tag it on to a specific, trying to keep to the theme per se. So nothing too much right here. But in an alliance, there's one item to take note is that if you control multiple creatures that each have an alliance ability, all of the alliance ability will trigger at the same time. So then you can put it onto the stack in any order that you choose. And the last one will be put on the stack will be the first one to resolve. So it's pretty basic in terms of like the understanding. So I think most of us here are all of us here are judges, so it should not be an issue. So I'll move on to the last family, which is otherwise known as the brokers. The brokers are actually they are the green, white, blue family. So basically they're the bun family, and their signature mechanic is the shield counters. So what are shield counters? So shield counters is really interesting because they provide two benefits. First is that if a permanent with a shield counter on it would be destroyed by an effect, the shield counter is actually removed instead of the creature being destroyed. And the second benefit works against damage. So if a permanent with a shield counter on it would be dealt damage, that damage is completely prevented, and a shield counter is removed from the permanent. So in this case, if you say a permanent, it means a creature or planeswalker, the two card types that can be dealt damage. And I would feel, if you look at the entire mechanic as a whole, it feels very similar to how regeneration saves a creature. But to me, this is better. And this prevention effects works to stop any form of damage. In combat damage dealt by spells like Strangle, or damage dealt because of an activated or trigger ability, and even damage caused by infect. So if you are wondering whether shield counter actually stops the damage from effect, in fact, yes, it does, because infect modifies how the damage is being dealt to the creature, but it is still ultimately a damage that is being dealt to a creature. So if it's a damage that's still being dealt to a creature, it basically negates it altogether because of the shield counter. But you have to be careful, because if you were to use a shield counter, it won't work on a damage that's unpreventable. So if, for example, in some days I see you play EDH and somebody plays Toxic Deluge, gives you -X, -X, that shield counters wouldn't have any effect on it, and basically state-based action will just cause the creature to go to the graveyard. So the other thing as well is that shield counter will be can only block every shield counter on a permanent can only block one instance of damage. So if I were to say that if a creature is a double striking creature, it blocks the first one, but the second one will go through if you don't have a shield counter left. But on the other hand, if, like, say I have a creature with a shield counter and I have two creatures blocking the creature with the shield counter, those damage from both permanents will be blocked by just that one shield counter. So this is something important that you want to take note, especially if you are going to judge another event, a future event later on. Yeah. So moving on, there's also a returning mechanic, a returning keyword ability, which is called Hideaway. You have seen this in Alara, Shards of Alara before. This was one of the more interesting mechanics they came up with, like, say, the one of the cycle of lands, like Wind Breeze Heights and so on. So previously there was a bit of there was some very fixed definition in terms of how Hideaway works. So this has actually received a small update since it last appeared. So basically, Hideaway is used to inherit. It used to mean 4 cards. That means you need to hide away 4 cards. There's no number to it. But now it can be any number. So you can see, like, for example, Fight Rigging to the right. Hideaway is actually 5 instead of 4. And they have actually also clarified to separate the other portion, which is it used to be as part of the Hideaway effect. You have to enter the battlefield tab. Whatever that has the Hideaway, the permanent, it has to enter the battlefield tab. But that is no longer the case. So previous cards that have, like, for example, like the Alara cycle of lands that used to have the Hideaway, now basically has their text separated. So You will see this later down the presentation when I show you the difference between the original card and the new printing of, like, say, Wind Breeze Heights with the new revised text that came out during the last secret layer drop. Yeah, so I'll show that to you later on, and things will be a bit clearer on that portion. So that's one thing. Then other than that, in terms of how Hideaway works, it's fundamentally the same, just that it is just clarified a bit more to be, I guess it'll be a bit more flexible when WeiJia decides to build new cards in the future. So outside of this, that is pretty much it in terms of new Capenna's mechanics, and as well as the returning mechanics as well. So I'm going to move on to the notable card specific FAQs. Now, new Capenna has some interesting cards, and I guess some of them you have already seen before. For example, none other than Jinifei. Jinifei has a very interesting replacement mechanic with doing coming to do with tokens. So what she does here is that if you would create one or more tokens, you can instead choose to create that many 2/2 green cat creature tokens with haste, or many 3/1 green dog creature tokens with vigilance. So if you're a cat or a dog lover, Jinifei has both of them for you. They have the best of both worlds. So what happens if we have some interesting interactions? For example, if I play Pest Infestation on the top right-hand corner, and with Jinifei out, and I turn the pest into cats or dogs, do these tokens also have gain 1 life ability? Because as you can see in the sorcery, that you gain you create twice X 1/1 black and green pest creature tokens with when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. And does that happen? In this case, no, because if the abilities granted to the pest tokens are part of this same sentence, they are part of the same sentence basically, and they will not inherit the death trigger here. But however, if, for example, it says those creature gain this ability, then your replace tokens will also still get that effect on top of whatever they have. So if you were to create a 2/2 green cat creature token, it gains haste, and on top of that, if it says those creature gains, you gain when this creature dies, you gain 1 life, then they gain this sentence as well. But how about in a second scenario where you say, in the case of Leonine War Leader, do the cats and dogs ETB tap and attacking? In this case, yes, because Genie's effect only replaces a relevant part, which is the token's power, toughness, type, and ability. And if you choose, however, if you choose dog tokens, they'll still come in tapped despite the vigilance ability. So the second one is the Rose Room Treasurer. This came out in the new Capenna Commander set. So this alliance basically means that whenever another creature ETBs under your control, you create a creature, you create a treasure token. If this is the first or second time this ability is resolved, if it's the third time and above, you may pay X, and if you do, you deal X damage to any target. So what happens? How does this interact with Jinifei? So if it triggers and creates a treasure token, does the dog entering the battlefield cause the Rose Room Treasurer alliance ability to trigger again? So the answer is, well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that if it's the first and second time Rose Room triggers, and Genie allows you to replace that treasure token with a cat and dog, yes, it does trigger Rose Room's Treasurer's ability, but on the third and subsequent time, it does not make a token anymore, but it just gives you that option to pay X and deal X damage to any target. So it's not infinite. Yeah. So yes, it's good, but it's not that infinite, but quite synergistic, as you can see. So aside from that, if, like, say, how about I put Ognis together with Jinifei? How does that work? Well, if I like say for example, if I have some cats from Genie Fei and they have haste and they attack, Oddness makes that treasure tokens that can turn into more haste cats. And do those kitties come into play tap, or do those kitty tokens maintain their haste ability throughout the turns? If I attack on my next turn, do they trigger Oddness? The answer is yes, because these tokens are still created tap. They replace the characteristic of the tokens that are created, but every other effect that creates the token still apply. So example, like if you see the first question, if you refer back, you can see that, if we in the case of Liaoning War Leader, Genie's effect only replaces the relevant part. So in this case, yeah, it only replaces that relevant portion and the rest still continues. So what this means at the end of the day is that these tokens will retain their haste, and attacking with them next turn will cause Ogni's ability to create more tap treasure token, which in fact you can still replace them with either a cat or dog creature token, whatever is your choosing. Yeah, so pretty interesting in Genie Fei overall in terms of her ability. And I think she's one of the more interesting commanders that you can start building for your next casual meetup. So moving on to even more interesting and familiar face, which is called Urubrask. You've seen Urubrask before as one of the praetors of New Phyrexia. He's back here again in New Capenna, and he has some interesting mechanics this time around and interactions that I have seen in the judge groups as well as also in the field. So one of it is how about what happens, if how best should the judge handle a call if, like, say, for an opponent of Urabras draws for the turn before allowing its trigger to go on the stack. Because if you look at what Urabras does, is that it does create a very interesting trigger where it says that at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next time they would draw a card this turn, they exile the top card of their library, and they may play it this turn. So what happens if the opponent draws before allowing the trigger to go on the stack? And if it's the second or third time that the player did this, yep. So just a really quick refresher on judging memory, as well as that if you need to also remember, the player also will also need to remember that ample time needs to be given to remind the opponents. And if they still draw before the trigger resolves, then in this case it will be handled as a HCE, or otherwise known as hidden card error. And in terms of how it's going to be remedied, I would say that this is going to be more of the Thoughtseize fix. Okay. So then in this case, where if you recall how the Thoughtseize fix is done, is that the player will actually show his hand to the opponent picks a card, and that will be that card that is considered as the exiled top card of their library. And they may play it this turn if they want to. And if the upkeep and draw step was rushed through intentionally, well, yes, I guess you need to do investigation in this case, because that's probably grounds for cheating. Yeah. So that's one interesting thing that you want to keep in mind, especially when it comes to people who play Urubrask. The second thing is that, for example, if how about Blue Sun Zenith? If I were to cast Blue Sun Zenith, how does that interact with Urubrask? Do those cards go into exile instead? In this question, no, not really. Urubrask only replaces the first card your opponents would try to draw, and that's usually in the draw step, unless you want to cast it during the upkeep. Then then it will replace the first card draw. And other than that, it wouldn't be affected. So how about in an EDH scenario where we are playing Drenith Magistrate, a player is playing a stacks deck versus with a Urubrask on the board. Can its ability create a combo lock with Drenith Magistrate? Well, yes, it does, but it wouldn't really be a hard lock per se, because Urubrask will exile the top card of their library rather than draw it. It gives them the permission to play it from exile, but the magistrate will forbid your opponents from casting spells from anywhere but their hand. So whatever that they exile at the top card of their library, they basically can't cast it. And well, it is not so much of a restriction per se, but maybe something for you to consider if you are building another stacks deck next time. And Urubas only affects the very first card draw each turn, so if so they can still draw cards through other means, unless you decide to play Narset, for example. And they can still play lands that they exile with Urubras, because they didn't. Or if you read the last sentence of Urubras, they say that they may play it this turn, so you can play lands. But if it says they may cast it this turn, then you may not play lands. Yeah, so that's something to take note. Now, moving on to the next and the last one, which is which is also very interesting. I felt that it was quite interesting because it involves a very important mechanic, I would say, in New Capenna, which is known as Blitz. So if you recall what Blitz does, is that you may choose to cast a card for its Blitz cost as an alternative. And if you do, it gains haste. And when this creature dies, you draw a card. And of course, you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So just a quick recap for you guys before we move into this. So we have a few interesting interactions with some of these cards. One of it is Goreclaw and Henzie. Henzie is quite interesting commander because he modifies like how creature spells you cast with an alternative cost of Blitz. So basically, each creature spells you cast with mana value 4 or greater has Blitz, and the cost of that Blitz is equal to its mana cost. And on top of that, you pay 1 less for each Blitz cost each time you cast a commander from the command zone this game. So it doesn't have to be Henzie to be the commander. It could be another commander, and Henzie's on the board, and you still receive the cost reduction bonus on top of it. So getting to some of the interactions that we have. One is if I cast my commander once and I have Goreclaw on the board, will the Blitz cost for, like, say, for example, Artisan or Kozilek be 6 mana? Answer is yes, because let's break it down. So this is really focusing on the fundamentals in terms of how to cast a spell. So Blitz cost is an alternative cost effect by Henzie. So that's still 9 colorless if you look at Artisan or Kozilek. So because its effect is basically the Blitz cost is equal to its mana cost. So mana cost is 9. Then you take the alternative cost, add any additional cost, which we do not have any additional cost, followed by cost reduction. So in this case, there are 2 cost reductions. One is one colorless less from Henzie, which was casted once from the command zone. So that brings it down to 8. And 2 colorless less from Goreclaw, which is from his first ability right here, because it's power 4 or greater. So it will be 6 colorless as the final casting cost. Basically, that's the net cost. So how about Chainer Nightmare Adept? For example, how does that interact with Henzie? Because why I chose Chainer is because it has a very interesting ability where you say you can discard a card as an activated ability, and you can cast a creature card from your graveyard, but you can only do it once each turn. So what happens? Am I able to blitz creature from my graveyard with this commander? Question is, the answer is yes, you can. If you have an effect that lets you cast creatures from your graveyard, for basically this guy right here, and you can blitz as per usual, because it's just a different way of cast. It's still casting a creature card. It doesn't matter where it comes from. So the third one is also an interaction with Lithoform Engine. So I blitz a creature in and then copy the creature on cast with Lithoform Engine with its third ability. Does the copy gain haste? And the text, when the creatures die, draw a card, and do I have to sack at the end step? So the answer is no, surprisingly. Because why? Because the copy of the Blitz creature won't have haste because you didn't cast it for the Blitz cost. It was basically copied. And if the creature enters the battlefield as a copy, it basically doesn't copy how it was being cast. So that is pretty much it in terms of some of the more interesting cards that I've seen in New Capenna. On to CR and Oracle updates. So CR and Oracle updates, I think if you have been listening in on the conference right now, the presentation, you'll notice that we covered quite a number of CR and Oracle updates. But there are some things that are not actually covered. So this is the one of them, which is the new definition for base power and toughness. So what happened here is that because of a particular card here that's called Best Soul Nourisher, WotC also changed the definition. Rather, they split the definition into two in terms of what is the meaning of base power and toughness. The first one is 208.4a, which is the original definition of the base power and toughness. So basically, what is base power and toughness is basically if an effect tries to set the power toughness of a creature, they'll refer to the base power toughness of the creature, and it can still be modified by other continuous effects as usual. So this is another fundamental judge training for you guys, or rather a refresher for you guys. Remember the 7-layer cake. This is the 7 layer in which has 5 sub layers. So this is related to the creature power toughness. So like the sub layers that you can see to the right that I've listed right here, this is a very quick refresher for you guys. So for 208.4a, all you need to remember is that this is just the original definition of what it used to be, and it is still the case. It's just split up. And why it is split up is because the second version, 208.4b, now explains how to calculate the current base power and toughness of a creature if an effect like Best decides to check it. So how does that work? In this case, if I have an effect from Best that wants me to check a base power toughness of a creature, it will only check 3 sub layers. The first one, which is the characteristic defining ability. So that would mean things like, for example, Tarmogoyf. It determines the characteristic the ability defines the characteristic. That means to say that if they're equal to the number of card types in everybody's graveyard. So that is one. Second is the power toughness setting. So you apply each layer as per usual. You start with the defining ability first, and then the power toughness setting. So if it asks you to set it to a 4/4, for example, then it is a 4/4. And then after that, you look at the final sublayer, which is the power toughness switch. So if it asks you to, if it's a 4/3 and it asks you to swap the power and toughness around, so it becomes a 3/4. So then at the end of the day, what Best would see as a base power and toughness will be a 3/4. So other than that, there's nothing much to really take note of, but I think this is something that's important to keep in mind, especially when you encounter very complicated base power toughness checking. Especially, I will foresee this will only happen 90% of the case in Commander. It wouldn't happen too often in Modern and Legacy, I hope. So moving on. Hideaway. So as I explained earlier, Hideaway has a bit of change and update to how they define how the ability works. So as you can see, Secret Layer Drop thankfully actually has an updated text version of it. So you can see that how Hideaway has actually changed from it's just called Hideaway, and then look at top 4 cards of your library, remove one of them face down and put the rest on the bottom of your library. It becomes separated into 2 different abilities. Hideaway form basically just tells you to look at Hideaway X number of cards, where X is equals to 4, put the rest at the bottom of your library, and then the enters the battlefield tab is a separate ability altogether. So you will have instances of Hideaway, as you have seen in New Capenna cards, that don't enter the battlefield tab. So the next time if a player does ask you about that, just tell them that, oh, it has been changed. So that's a new Oracle change right there. Moving on, there's also very minor Oracle changes. So one of it is that if a spell will be put into graveyard, so it becomes, if that spell will be put into graveyard, exile it instead. So why they changed that is basically, well, it's common sense. Like it's not really possible if you cast a spell this way to go into a graveyard and then it goes exile. So the functionality still remains the same. It's just some wording change, and it only affects 15 cards in the whole Magic set. So don't worry about it. So then, of course, there is all the new keyword actions that are officially added to the entire pool of keyword actions. As we have went through them before, I'm not going to go through them into detail again. You can basically, all you need to know right here is that they are all officially part of the CR. So just is basically a quick recap on everything that we've covered so far. Last but not least, something interesting for you guys is that squirrels are officially legit creature type. So now the last time, a raccoon, my bad, raccoon. Raccoon is officially a creature type now. So yes, rocket raccoons in the picture right here, and they are officially a creature card that you can name if you were to name a creature type next time. Yep. So other than that, I've come to the end of the update for new Capenna. Thanks a lot for listening in. So I come to the Q&A session. Let me know if you have any questions. Ask me anything. You can even ask me things about myself. I don't mind that also, but I think that's deviating away from the conference. So let me know if you have any questions about what we have covered so far through the chat, or either through the voice chat as well. That will be even better as well. So just let me know what you have, and I'm happy to answer that. I'll take about roughly 3 to 4 minutes. Just before we move on to the next part of the conference.
WeiJia, can you go back to the power and toughness thing again? Because can you do an example of changing the power and toughness, because it doesn't feel any different from what we did before. So can you maybe explain what's the main difference again? Because I still got a bit confused.
Okay, so so basically this entire change, from what I understand, is that base power and toughness has 2 different definitions now. One is the original definition, what we already know. Basically is that you have the base power and toughness, and it can be affected by everything else in the sub layers. So that means if I give it +1/+1 from +3/+3 from Giant Growth, or I get +1/+1 counters, it will affect the final power toughness of the creature. That is the first definition. Nothing changes from that. But the second one, which is an effect, if the effect asks me to choose, the effect asks me to determine what's the base power toughness of a creature, it only looks at a few things. One is the characteristic defining, One is the characteristic defining ability. The other one is the power toughness setting. So if I say, okay, so let's say, for example, Tarmogoyf is a 2/3 now, and if I were to have a changeling that changes, that has a board-wide effect that says that all creatures that you control are 4/4 base power and toughness, that is the power and toughness setting that you need to apply in the next layer. So the base power and toughness for Tarmogoyf is a 4/4 now. Then that is the base power and toughness that Best would see, for example. But if I were to say that if it's a 3/4 creature and there is a effect that switches the power and toughness of the creature, which is in sub layer E here, so the base power and toughness at the end of the day, it's a 4/3. So that is how, so basically what you do is it is nothing different from what we've already done, but it's just really more of a recap of how we calculate base power and toughness. So in this case, you go down the line through the sub layers, apply it one by one, and that will give you the final answer.
Okay, so essentially it's the same, like just that they give another line elaborating more specifically what is the how to set the base power and toughness, is it?
Correct. Because previously they lumped it all into one big paragraph, and that big paragraph only talks about, like, say, if I try to set it to a specific number, then you refer to the base toughness of the creature. But then they never tell you to refer to the 601, which is the 7-layer cake, which defines a little bit more about how an effect checks the final base power toughness of a creature. So basically, they made it a bit clearer by splitting it into 2 different definitions.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So I have another question that is coming in for Arif, I think. Okay, so I got a question coming from Nathan. So is there an errata update for Henzie yet? Well, what kind of errata or update? I'm not too sure. It doesn't work as written. So are we going to get errata or an update for its text? How does that work? Do you have a mic? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, I can.
Okay. So for Henzie right now, right, its text reads each creature spell you cast with so and so has blitz.
Mhm.
Now blitz is 2 static abilities and the delay trigger lah, right?
Yeah.
So once the creature enters, it will lose blitz, correct? Because it is no longer a creature spell.
Okay, blitz itself is actually is a name for an effect rather than an ability. So in this case, blitz is not actually an ability per se, but blitz as a word itself is called an alternative cost.
Okay, yeah, I mean, okay, like definitely you can cast it for the alternative cost for blitz, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, once it enters, as of now, with the text written, right? Because once it enters, the creature permanent does not have blitz. It will not have the static abilities that if it was cast for its blitz cost, this permanent gains haste, and when it dies, you draw a card.
Okay.
So is this the way that Henzie is intended to work, or are we going to get an adjustment?
Okay, so maybe I just try to understand your question a bit. So you're saying that after I cast a creature spell, for example, Artisan or Kozilek, and for its blitz cost, so you're saying that it no longer has blitz in this case?
Yeah, so once it resolves, it no longer has blitz on the card itself, right? Because it is no longer a creature spell.
Well, it is okay. It is a creature spell. It is a creature spell, but it is cast for its blitz cost, but it doesn't tag anything to it. So if you it doesn't really tag anything.
So
to it.
I mean, while it's on the stack, we all understand it has blitz, right? You can cast it for its blitz cost. It will create the delay trigger.
Yeah,
but once it enters the battlefield, right, it no longer has blitz. So it no longer has the static ability where if it was cast for its blitz cost, it gains haste.
How do you arrive to that?
Can you go back to the blitz page?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I just wanted to get a better understanding of your question. Yeah.
No problem. So you see, static ability number 2, as long as this permanent blitz cost was paid, it gains haste. But this is a static ability. So it will be checking only when this permanent is on the battlefield, correct?
No, the ability is already granted the moment you pay the blitz cost. So the moment you pay the blitz cost is resolved, it will give you that haste even before it enters the battlefield.
But if I dress down a blitz creature, I will not have haste.
Okay, let's have a look at dress down really quickly. So in this case, one moment.
Dress down, humidity, other ability losing effects.
Yeah. Okay, so now this one. Okay, so this one is a interesting ability. In terms of dress down, because I believe Master CJ here has a bit of something on the quiz that we would like to give you guys a bit more of a challenge on. So CJ, do you want to chime in here?
Wait, so I think I'll just answer Arif's question.
Ken.
So if you have a dress down or humility on the battlefield and you cast a creature via the blitz cost, what happens? Blitz has a couple of things happening right here. So first of all, you have to see if this blitz spell cost was paid. Sacrifice this permanent ability on next end step. That is a delayed triggered ability. So if you look at dress down and humility, both they are losing abilities. You don't really lose a delayed triggered ability because it's a delayed triggered ability. But whatever that is on the blitz creature, for example, as long as this permanent blitz cost or paid, it has haste and permanent put graveyard battlefield dies, draw a card. It gets wiped out by dress down and humility.
Pretty much the same way as okay, just to clarify, right? So pretty much it's the same way as it happens with dash. So dash versus dress down. So in this case, dress down would prevent and the existence of bliss in the first place, and it will also we apply dress down first because it's an independent effect, and then
dress down removes the hex.
Sorry.
Sorry, please continue.
Oh, okay, no worries. Yeah. In this case, I would if you ask me, right, it is the same I would say it's the same interaction as if you will try to dash a creature while dress down is on the dress down is in effect. So in this case, dress down will actually prevent the existence of blitz in the first place because you don't even have blitz because of dress down. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so dress down removes blitz from the card, right?
Yeah.
Like the permanent itself. In the case of Henzie, once the spell becomes a permanent, it no longer has blitz. Because Henzie reads creature spells you cast have blitz. The creature permanent the spell becomes does not have blitz.
Okay, so Nathan, blitz is dealing with more or less the casting side of things. So once it comes down, right, all these abilities should have already been applied, even with the trigger ability.
It's an effect, yeah. It's an alternative cost that grants an effect to a permanent, but it's not like say a blitz effect that it's an inherent ability that is supposed to be there in the first place. It's like if I were to put it in another way, if I were to rephrase this, right, how does giant growth affect a creature? It applies onto the creature rather than it applies as a layer effect onto a creature rather than, for example, inherent ability that is supposed to tell the creature that creature gains haste. So it's more of like a check on that portion. I'm not sure if that's a bit clearer for you guys, for you.
So from reading the ability itself, which you put it in your slide, it says basically what we are looking for is like when we have a permanent, we are looking for like was a blitz cost paid for that permanent. In the case of the creature that was given blitz by the creature spell that was given blitz by unknown reason, well, the condition is true. That is like we paid a blitz cost for that. And in that case, it will give haste to the permanent that result from casting the creature spell, even if like there's something between like creature spell and no, it does not have blitz inherently. Was a blitz code pay? Yes. In that case, can we check if that permanent had a blitz code paid for that? Yes. So does it work? Yes, it works like kind of as intended. Even if like there's some slight confusion, like it may be clearer, but in that case, it's perfectly, if you go by the rules, it works. No, it does not have blitz. Was a blitz called spade? Yes. Is it a permanent from with a blitz called paid? Yes. So does it give it haste? Yes. It works. For me, it's like, it could be clearer, but it works.
So I think to answer your question, Nathan, in terms of whether they errata it or not, I don't really know. But I would say that I think in terms of the general understanding, at least from the judges as well, is that if that ability was already granted to that creature spell, it's not tied. Okay, so it's not okay. The check whether it has haste or not as a result of like paying the blitz cost is not tied to blitz itself. It just says that if you look at what blitz definition is that you if you cast blitz if you cast a card for its blitz cost, then it gains haste. So Henzie itself gives a card gives that spell rather a blitz cost. So then because they have fulfilled these two conditions, it has a blitz cost because of Henzie. The other one is I paid the blitz cost, then I gain that ability. It's not because of blitz, I gain that ability in that sense. It's because it fulfills two conditions, it gains that ability.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, Wen.
Hold on, something is wrong with my headphones. Hold on a second. All right, can everyone hear me properly now?
Yep.
Okay. I was asked about this particular question about Henzie before, and I understand where I think it was Nathan who asked this question first. So I understand where he's coming from. Basically, because can you go back, WeiJia, to the page with
Sure thing.
Yeah. Okay. As mentioned before, blitz is represents 3 abilities. Okay, 2 static abilities while it's on the stack, and 1 while the object with blitz is on the battlefield. So there are 2 things that it works on when you cast it, and 1 thing that it does while it's on the battlefield. Now, I will address the last one first, which we are talking about while this object blitz is on the battlefield. Okay. Now, if you look at the definition of blitz, the permanent doesn't actually gain haste. Okay. What it does have, though, is a blitz ability, and blitz says as long as this permanent's blitz cost was paid, it has haste. All right. So technically speaking, the creature does not have haste. The creature has blitz, and if you paid the blitz cost, blitz says as long as this permanent's blitz cost was paid, it has haste. All right. So this is why precisely this card Henzie was being discussed online about it not working technically speaking. Okay, not to say from the way we understand what the card is supposed to do. I think we all understand what Henzie is trying to do. Okay, and if you were to ask me, you know, how Henzie works, I think most of us will all have the same understanding of how it works. But technically speaking, looking at the way the ability is actually worded, creatures that are cast with Henzie's ability, which grants the creature spell blitz while it's on the stack, doesn't actually achieve that. Okay, so that's why people say, hey, when the creature that you cast with Henzie is actually on the battlefield, that creature doesn't have blitz, which is true. The creature doesn't have blitz, and blitz is the thing that actually grants that or makes that creature have haste. It doesn't actually gain haste. The creature that you cast with blitz does not gain haste. So this is actually a problem of the way the blitz ability has been worded in the CR. And as far as the question Nathan asked about, will Henzie be reworded or will blitz be reworded to make Henzie work as intended? I think we don't have an answer for that at the moment. I don't think there's been any actual word from Jess or anyone else on the WotC team. So as of now, we don't know. But it's kind of why there is this confusion. Henzie works the way we think it should work, but if I were to argue with you solely on what it is written on in the CR, then Henzie doesn't quite work. The creature will enter the battlefield, its blitz cost was paid, but it does not have blitz. So when you don't check, was this permanent blitz paid cost and it has haste, because it doesn't have blitz in the first place. If on the battlefield it has blitz, then yes, I will look at this card and say, like for example, Jaxis the Troublemaker, it has blitz. So I cast it for its blitz cost, and then what does blitz mean for Jaxis? Blitz means that did you pay the blitz cost for Jaxis? Yes, it has haste. No, it doesn't have haste. But the creature itself does not have the haste ability. So this is why, you know, when you're talking about us rules lawyers going to lawyer about this, this is what we're talking about, lawyering it. It doesn't have haste. Now, if you dress down it, do you still have to sacrifice it? The answer to that question is yes, because that ability, the triggered ability from casting the spell with blitz. When you cast a spell with blitz, it creates a delayed triggered ability. That delayed triggered ability will have already triggered and is waiting to resolve at the beginning of the next end step. So removing blitz at that point doesn't do anything because the delayed triggered ability has already been created. So I hope this answers the question that Nathan wanted to ask. Yes, it is confusing. Yes, technically, as written, Henzie doesn't quite work how we think it should work. I don't know if it will be fixed. If anyone has any more questions to ask about this or wants to argue about this, that's fine, because the way it's written right now, it's just not that great. Okay?
I will agree with that as well, Wen. Because I think the only change that I think I've been reading some of the forums on Reddit as well regarding Henzie, because I felt that his wording was also a little bit strange in that sense. And when I went to research a little bit, I think the only change that he needs is just he needs to remove that creature spell. He just needs to be each spell you cast. Each creature you cast, sorry. Yeah. And that would actually pretty much clarifies everything.
Or it might just say that, you know, I don't know, creature cards you control have, I don't know, I mean, whether it's on the stack or maybe I'm not really sure what is the correct way to word it, because I am not on the templating team, so I don't really know how stuff is worded now. But yeah, the way that it's written right now in the CR is causing a bit of trouble. From technically speaking, it is causing that trouble. That's why this argument came out in the first place. All good? Yeah.
Yep. So I guess the last part to add, I pasted the 702.152, which is Blitz. So basically, whatever word has explained is basically based on this CR right here. So I also have people PM me, telling me, hey, you know, getting the haste ability is gain haste. But yes, that is on the reminder text, and we should follow whatever is on the CR. Because they're asking me, gaining haste is on layer 6, losing abilities from dress down also layer 6. So isn't it timestamp? Oh, actually not really, because if you read in the blitz in the CR, as long as the blitz cost was paid, it has haste, and you have the when it is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. So just refer to the comprehensive rules. Yep. Wen, you got anything else to add?
No, I'm good. Unless anyone else wants to ask something, otherwise, yeah, I'll be muting myself again.
Okay. WeiJia, you have any more? You muted yourself before talking.
Sorry. So I think there are quite a number of questions coming in from the team. So if do we still have time to address them, or if not, then I can just address them inside the chat as the presentation goes along.
So actually, now is break time. I think I can just start the break. It's basically 10 minutes. And WeiJia, if you want, you can just reply right here.
Yeah, I can reply directly to the chat just to ensure that we stay on time. So thanks a lot for listening in, and it's a really interesting discussion, especially coming with Henzie. So thanks a lot, Nathan, for the question, because I think this really helps to retrigger our rules lawyer's brain again. And I think in this case, is because of how the way the card was worded, and I think it's universally agreed across the community that it could have been better. So thanks a lot for that. And also thanks for listening in, guys, on the new Capenna update. So we'll see you again
so I'll
next round.
see you guys in 3:50 Singapore time or 2:50 Jakarta or Bangkok time.
Yeah, WeiJia, sorry, I know, okay,
Yeah.
you guys can go for break, but WeiJia, if you want to answer the question, right, can you answer via so that we have it in recording, because the recording don't show the chats.
Oh, okay, sure, no problem.
Thank you.
No problem. So let me just go through some of the questions, because I think there's a slew of questions that came in while we were doing the discussion. Those who want to go on a break, please feel free to go on a break. Don't let me stop you from that. Yeah. So let's see. Okay, thanks a lot, Nathan, for the question. So let me see who's next in the line. Okay. Quick one. Michael, will we get Raccooning secret layer tie-up? I don't know. Probably yes. I would like that. Greater Tanuki is still a dog. Good question. They might change it, just like how they changed to add the additional Parisian creature type. So probably they might change dog to become a raccoon. Arif, if I cast creature with a blitz cost and there's a dress down humility on the battlefield, what would happen? Well, I think that's already been answered. So just a quick recap that if you have dress down humility in effect, and you try to cast a creature, it doesn't have the blitz in the first place. So it doesn't have the blitz in the first place because of this effect. So just something to just keep in mind. Are we going to get an errata rules update for his text? Well, yeah, this unfortunately we do not know. So for Connive, answered by Benny, question by Benny. For Connive, what would happen if there is a draw restriction? So like for example, Narasethapong. So in this case, let me reshare my screen really quickly. So let's head back to Connive right here. So if a restriction does not allow you to draw a card, then you will still need to discard the card. You try to do as much as the effect asks you to do. So in this case, if you were have Narasethapong in play and you've already drawn first card for your turn, then well, you can't draw any more cards, right? So the only thing you can do is let's take the reminder text down here, for example. You just cancel this away, and also basically what it just tells you is discard a card, and if you discard a non-end card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So basically that's what happens. So okay, let me see what are the questions that you guys may have.
Which I think there's another
Ryan.
one by Ryan V.
Yeah.
You want to ask what? If you scroll up right after the connive question, there is another question.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. What would happen? What token would Jaxis create when targeting Goldhound when Academy Manufacturer is on the field?
Well, I think I answered that question already.
Oh,
I
you
guess
answered the
I'll
question.
just say it out because
Yep.
I type it out. So basically, similar to Son, the one in Adventures of the Forgotten Realm, they are looking at treasure tokens with the name treasure. So Goldhound is a card. If you create a token, it is a token named Goldhound with the creature with the subtype of treasure. So now, yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate.
At the list, Chris, I think I already answered him because he did ask like, I thought all these gaining and losing abilities is applied at layer 6, which is correct, yes. And it all comes down to timestamp, right? Well, there's also, don't forget, in doing the 7-layer cake, right? There's 2 aspects. One is timestamp, and the other one is whether there's a check for dependency or not. So, if you remember the Blood Moon scenario, that one is a perfect example of that, Chris. So I think what you were referring to earlier was while we were discussing the blitz question. So I think just to answer your question, right, if you were to have like say an effect like dress down in play, then yeah, you wouldn't even get to do the blitz in the first place. So yeah, you don't it's not really relevant afterwards.
Okay, I guess I will take the last question by Ryan. So, you know, it means for the treasure, let's say at the beginning of upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. Can't reveal in something that black 5 mana enchantment from Ixalan. So that is what it means. So as for things like Son and Academy Manufacturer, it really sees the exact name. You know, it has to look at the name. So the name of Goldhound, yes, is a treasure, but his name is Goldhound. His name is not treasure. Yeah, similar Academy Manufacturer. You know, if you create a clue that has the type clue, I think there are some clues. There is similar to like Goldhound like that. It is actually named something else in I think Innistrad. They also don't have the replacement effect of Academy Manufacturer because you have to create the exact clue, you create the exact food, and you create the exact treasure. So does that answer your question, Ryan? Okay, so now we have Robin from the Maestros family. Is going to teach us something very fundamental, which is how to cast a spell. Which Robin, can you share?
Yep. Wait a minute.
Your screen. Yep.
Okay, everyone,
Wait,
can you see my screen? Please
Yeah, we
type
can
1
see your
if you
screen.
can see my screen.
Okay, over to you, Robin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Everyone can see my. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Now I will present about how to cast a spell. How to cast a spell 101. Every step about it. Okay, before I do that, let me introduce myself. Who am I? My name is Robin, the Maestros Artisan. Just kidding. Might as well embrace the title that you give to me. Okay, my name is Robin Williams Lai. I am an L2 from Indonesia. I began playing the MTG since Shadow of Innistrad in 2016. And then I become a judge since September 2018, and becoming L2 by the end of January this year. Okay. What we will learn today is Elspeth is just a Gal Gadot in disguise. Nah, just kidding. What we will learn is that all crazy teens have carelessly tried a magic spell. Before we continue on, let's have a quick quiz. What is the first most step to casting a spell? First, the A, tap the mana and pay the mana cost. B, announce what spell to cast. And C, selecting a target for a spell if any. Please type in the chat, friends. Okay, I see a lot of B here. All right. Okay. 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 All right. Okay. For the correct answer is B. Sorry. Let's go back. You announce what spell to cast. That's the correct answer. The B. For some people that say it's A or C or something. Okay. We will back to here. What we will learn that all crazy teens have carelessly tried the magic pill. What is the meaning of all crazy teens have carelessly tried the magic pills? Okay. The A stand for announce. While the crazy stand for choice. The teen stands for target. The have stand for how to define. The carelessly stand for legality. The T stand for total cost determination. The M, the magic stay for magic mana capability, and the pills stay for pace. We will break down it one by one. Okay, first the announce. All right, wait a minute. The announce. Okay. The announce first. To purpose of casting a spell, a player first move the card to the copy of the card from where it is to the stack. It becomes the first topmost object on the stack. It will all has the characteristic of the card or the copy of the card associated with it, and that players become its controller. The spell remains on the stack until it resolves or it's countered, or a rule that affects move it elsewhere. That's for the announce. The second one is the choices. If the spell is model, like this Mystic Confluence, the players announce the model choose. Like if you want to choose the counter or a draw card, first you choose the model that you want to choose. The second one is, sorry. Okay, the second one is if you want to splice the card into arcane or splice card into something. They must reveal the cards in the hand, and then the effect will be added to the spell that casted. Third is alternative and additional costs. Like the cap size, it has alternative, have additional cost as a buyback, or the force of will have alternative cost. You may pay one and blah 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 blah. If it has alternative or additional costs, it will be paid as it is being cast, such as payback or kicker costs. And then the player announces the intention how to pay the cost. The player can apply two alternative methods or casting two alternative costs to a single spell. The next is the variable cost and the hybrid mana. The variable cost most of the time it such as X at this mana cost. The player announces the value that is variable. For example, if you cast the Chalice of the Void at X1, then you pay XX, which is 1, and you pay 2 mana for it. The next is Phyrexian Mana Symbol or compleat for something. The player will announce the non-hybrid equivalent case that they intend to pay here. And if the Phyrexian mana, do you want to play 2 life with it, correspond with it? You choose to pay it here. You choose it how to pay it here. Okay. The next is the target. First, the player announces their choice of appropriate object or each other target that spell requires. A spell may require some target or not. For example, like this Tiefling Skydiver. It requires a target after it being kicked. But if you cast the Tiefling Skydiver without kick, it will not require a target. The next one is announce how many target they will be in it will be in the spell. Okay. Once the target spell is determined, that number doesn't change. Even the information used to determine the target does change. The same target can be chosen multiple times for anyone instead of instance of the word target in a multiple place. Like the hex here, you cannot choose the 6 different target. You must choose the 6 different target. Meanwhile, the Seed of Strength can choose one same target 3 times. Okay. The next one is a little trivia. Did you know what is the difference between the Red Elemental Blast and the Pyroblast? All right, a little trivia about how the difference between the Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast. The correct answer is, yep, there is a target restriction and not a target restriction. For a Red Elemental Blast, you must target a blue spell. Meanwhile, for the Pyroblast, you may target other spell that not blue. But if it's blue, it will be destroyed or countered. But if it's not blue, that the spell will do nothing. But meanwhile, the Red Elemental Blast, you must target a specific blue spell or specific blue permanent, or you cannot cast it. Next is the divide. How to divide? If a spell require the player to divide or distribute an effect such as damage or counter among 1 or more target, the player announces the division. Its target must at least receive 1 or whatever it is being divided. So you cannot choose 0 when you divide. If you cast Fury, for example, you choose 4 target. You cannot choose 1 target to receive 0 damage. Okay, next one is C, the check the legality. Check if it's a spell legal to be cast or not. If this proposed spell is illegal, then the game returns to the moment before the casting of the spell was proposed. Okay. Next is the total mana cost determination. First, the player determines the total cost of the spell. Usually, it's the mana cost. For example, this Thalia, usually you pay 2 mana for it. But some spell has additional or alternative costs. Some effect also may increase or reduce the cost to pay, or may provide another alternative costs that include the paying mana, tapping permanent, sacrificing permanent, discarding a card, and so on. The additional costs that you need to pay. The total cost in the mana cost is alternative cost plus the all additional costs and the cost increase, and then you minus the cost reduction. If multiple costs reduction is applied, the player may apply it in any order. And then if the mana component of total cost is reduced to nothing and cost reduction effect, it is considered to be 0. And it cannot be reduced less than 0. For example, if you cast XX Hangerback Walker, and then you have 2 mana reduction, you can cost Hangerback Walker at 1 without paying any mana cost. And then once the total cost is determined, any effect that directly affect the total cost that applied will not change the total cost because the cost is already locked in. This one. Yes. Okay, the mana ability. The total cost include the mana payment, of course. The player that has chance to activate mana abilities must activate the cost before it being paid. Okay, the mana ability is activated ability that creates mana, of course, including the land like mountain or other cards like Bird of Paradise, World of Ice, or a trigger ability that of the mana creation that make more mana itself, such an overgrowth. If you see the power, not to yourself, the mana loyalty ability is not a mana ability. The last step is that you pay the cost. The player pay the cost. First, they pay all the cost that doesn't involve the random element or moving object from the library or the public zone or in any order. Then they pay all remaining costs in any order. Partial payment are not allowed. So you have to pay it full at the time you pay the spell that you cast. And playable costs also cannot be paid. Okay. Next is cash provision, such as these two cards. A player, of course, can only begin to cast a spell if a rule or effects allows the player to cast it, and a rule or effect prohibits it from casting it. In this example, that Void Renewal is prohibiting you from casting the even mana cost. So by the time you cast this, other players can cast the even mana cost. The cast will be prohibited by Void Renewal. If an effect prohibits a player from casting a spell with certain qualities, the player may consider any choice to be made during that spell proposal that change the qualities to change. If any such choice cause the effect to no longer prohibit that, you can cast that spell again. Okay, such as Teferi here, that opponent can cast spell only as sorcery, so it will be prohibits you from casting an instant or flash spell from outside the sorcery speed. Okay, next is alternative characteristic. Some rule and effects that considered to determine if a card or copy is legal to cast or not. For example, this the Garug Horde and Melek is a Paragon. The Garug Horde said that you can you play with the top card library open, refilled, and then you may cast it if it's a creature. Let you cast top deck if it's a creature, and the Melek is a Paragon is let you play if it's instant or sorcery. And let's say that if you refill Bone Crush Giant from the top, Garrug's Heart will allow you to play it only as Bone Crush Giant, and you can play the Storm effect from it. Meanwhile, Malak Izzet Paragon is only lets you cast the spell from as its Storm, not the Bone Crush Giant creature. Then, and if you have it, if you have both on the field, then you can cast it as a sorcerer, as an instant, which is Storm, or a creature, which is Bone Crush Giant. Next is, what if the cast from the face down exile card, set as this card? How can inside? How can you set that at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down, and you may cast it as long from this card remain exiled. Some effect allow players to cast a spell with a certain qualities from among face down card in the exile. A player may begin to cast a spell only if they can look at the face down card in exile. So if you can look at that face down card, you can cast it normally, like how you cast a spell. Next is a note to remember. Once a player has begun casting a spell that has flash, because certain conditions were met or that can be cast as it has spell, they may continue to cast that spell even though that flash is restricted. So for example, if you cast an instant spell and then somehow your opponent flash in a temporary time Reveler, that spell that you cast, that instant spell that you cast will continue to resolve, even though temporary will block the next spell that you can cast if it's at flash or instant speed. Next is some spell also specify that one of their controller opponent does something on the controller would normally do while it being cast, such as choose a mode or choose target. In this case, the opponent does so when the spell controller normally would do so. For example, this volcanic offering. Destroy target non-basic land you don't control and target non-basic land and opponent choice you don't control. So by the time you choose that target non-basic land you don't control, your opponent also choose the target non-basic land that you don't control. Or evangelize, such as gain control of target permanent of opponent choice that he or she choice, that he or she control, that your opponent will choose which creature that he or she will give to you. Next is okay. This two spell. Casting a spell that alters cost would affect the spell and the abilities that are already on the stack. Let's say that opponent casts an Obscura charm and then somehow and let's say you cast the Obscura charm and your opponent control an Arlene and flash in Thalia. The cost will be still 3, not 4, because the cost that when you cast the Obscura charm is locked in the previous moment, and the spell that alternate cost will not affect the spell that already on the. Okay. For some attention to some example. First of all, is this Fury, Justice, and Fury. How to cast the Fury, Justice, and Fury? Which which step that it will take the most in this place? Okay. Okay. The step that will make a lot of choice here is the step number 3, the target. First, you announce the Fury Justice and put it on the top of the stack. No choice, and then no choice to be met, and then select target. Variable number of target of player, targeting an opponent, and the last cost, the target opponent is mandatory. And then divide the damage. Each target must at least have 1 damage assigned to it. And then check whether it's a legal play or not. The cost is simply the mana cost because we don't have any other factor. Divide the mana ability, and then lastly pay the cost. Next, the difference between these two and the Fireball is the Fairy Justice and the Fury requires number that applies to every target at minimum 1, but not Fireball, because Fireball will divide it evenly, rounded down among any number of target that you choose. Next one is how to cast this spell, the cryptic command. Okay, in this cryptic command, you choose 2. In the step number 2 is playing the role the most. First, you announce a cryptic command and put it on the stack. Second, you choose the modes. Select 2. Let's say that you tap all your opponent's creatures and draw a card. Number 3 is select the target. Let's say if you counter target spell, you have to select the spell that you want to counter. If applicable, it will depend on the models that you choose. And then no division, check the target whether it is legal play or not. The cost is simply the mana cost, and activate the mana abilities to and then to pay the cost. Next one is how about the casualty? The casualty, which step did the creature is sacrificed if casualty is paid? Okay. The step to cast this spell is that first you announce the Omnisilist and then put it on stack. Second is whether or not you want to play the casualty. So if you choose to play the casualty, you choose it here, and then no target, and then no division, and check whether this is a legal target or legal play or not. Cost is simply the mana cost plus 1 additional cost of 1 creature if the casualty is chosen to be paid. And then activate the mana abilities to pay the cost for the Omnisilist. Next one is cost will be paid in this scenario. That scenario. So on the field, I have a Spear of Resistance, and then I cast Sharpness Blast as an instant. As additional cost, I will sacrifice the Spear of Resistance. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay, the answer is that you play 2 and the red. Why? Because by the time you cast the Sharpness Blast, the Spear of Resistance effect will still be applied. So you have to pay one more colorless mana to cast the Sharpness Blast, even though you sacrifice the Spear of Resistance as a part of the cost that Sharpness Blast needed. Yes, sorry. How about this? First, you cast Court of Calling. Can World Counter be used as Convoke and then sacrifice it as mana cost to pay the cost? Okay. The answer there, you cannot use World Counter mana ability to you can use the mana ability, but you cannot convoke it as a part of the cost because sec is at 7, right? So and convoke is at 8. So whether if you sec the Wild Counter at the step 7, which is mana ability, by the time you want to pay it at the step 8, when you convoke it, the Wild Counter will be on the grave already. And how about if you cast a Become Immerse? Can Wild Counter be used as a 1 mana ability that sacrificing and can Wild Counter be used as a okay. Yep, correct. The answer is yes, because at step 7 you sacrifice the Wild Counter to the grave, and by the time you want to cast the Become Immerse, it will see the Wild Counter at the grave, so you can delve it and exile it from the graveyard while casting this spell, and it will be considered as 1 colorless. And that's it. People thought just come to me sometime. I don't know if it's them or me thinking from this revenue. That's it. Thank you, everyone. May the spark be with you.
Okay, hi guys. My name is Neil. I'm going to be doing a presentation on competitive RUL on hidden card error. I do tend to speak a little fast, so if you guys have any section that I went too fast or anything, just just let me know in the chat, or if any question, always put in a chat. Okay. So because with the newcomer knife mechanic, it's actually quite easy for players to do draw extra cards. So therefore, I think it's a good idea for us to go over the hidden card error. Why is it not going to the next slide? Oh, here we go. Okay. So I'm just going to be doing the IPG style. I'll go over definition and examples, philosophy and fixes, run through some scenarios, and go over some Q&A. Okay. There is one thing that I would like everyone to take mind on this presentation, though. We would like to stress on the definition and actually identifying the hidden card error. I think most of you guys have actually did some ruling and do some fixes for the hidden card error already. But this is so that we actually knows what we are dealing with. Okay. So what is the definition of a hidden card error? So by the book definition is when a player commit an error in the game that cannot be corrected by only publicly available information. What is publicly available information? So that will be something like the game state, number of cards in the player's hand, anything on the board, the amount of life, for example, number of cards in the library. Those are publicly known available information. Hidden information would be something like the content of the face down card, the content of the card in your hand, etc. And since most of the gameplay can actually be seen by the player to some extent, like for example, if a player forgetting to discard a card, you can actually see that in the game. If he misses trigger, it's actually quite visible, and you can actually make some fixes to it without disturbing too much. But when we're dealing with ACE issue, we're actually dealing with hidden information. So therefore, some of the fix can be actually quite disruptive to the game. And a good example of hidden card error with hidden information would be if, for example, Amy casts a Stoneforge Mystic and forgetting to reveal, so she put a card right into her hand without reviewing. This is a hidden information because there is no way for us to identify or check the legitimacy of the card that she searched. Once the card is actually in her hand, we have no way to know if she actually did the search correctly. Did she infringe any of the condition on the card? And again, she's the one with all the information, all the hidden information, and she is the one that actually committed the error herself. Other examples also include a player drawing 4 cards from Ancestral Recall. They're scrying more cards they should have 2. Having more cards in hand than accounted for. And forgetting to review like the previous scenario for maybe like a Dark Confidant trigger, resolved it, but forgetting to review as well. Okay. So like I said in the beginning of my presentation that we would like to make sure that the situation at hand is an HCE. There is some scenarios or some cases that may look like an HCE, but it's actually other violation instead. That is because, like I said, the fixes is not reversible. Once usually you resolve ACE by showing people the hand, right? Once that's done, once you've seen it, you cannot take it back. So it's always a good idea to run it again in your mind, say, is this an HCE, and just to make it sure. Because having more cards in your hand does not automatically make it an HCE. I would always try to look for the root cause of the problem first before I decide on the ruling. Okay. So I will actually have a quick refresher on LEC and the GRV, just so you guys have that in your mind before we go through the scenario. So LEC, looking extra cards. So basically you're seeing something that you should not be entitled to see. And game rule violation is basically anything that is in game rule error related, right? Player is not resolving the spell properly, and etc. etc. Okay, so first part is It's not a hidden card error if the opponent controls the continuous effects that modify the game rule that make the action illegal. So a grand example of that is everyone's favorite planeswalker, Narasethapong. So if an opponent controls Narasethapong, it is his job to actually enforce it so that the players who on the opposite side does not accidentally draw a card, because you cannot just control Narasethapong, say nothing, and just let opponent commit an illegal action, because the owner of Narasethapong should be the one that actually preventing that problem from happening in the first place. So this actually would be a GRV instead, unless like in WeiJia slide, give out example with the Urabras, unless sufficient warning has been given and they still do it, and then that would be actually be HCE. Okay. Another one is not a hidden card if the opponent actually acknowledges that action. So if they are given a warning and they are already agree to it, you cannot get an HCE out of that. What would be example of that? So let's say I cast a cryptic command. I choose bounce and draw. So the second and the fourth one. Somehow the target for the bounce, let's say it got hexproof, becomes a illegal target. And then the caster of the cryptic command say, draw for cryptic. The opponent say, sure. Then that is not a HCE because the opponent is actually has been made aware that he is actually about to do a legal action. So this is because if we are going with that, then B can just agree with anything that A said just so he can get A to be penalized later, right? And that, I don't think that should be how the RPG stated that should not be how it should be enforced, because B can actually abuse it. So just let whatever A do, and then, just get a free dossier out of every action that A has committed. Okay. And this is a bit tricky. So let me know if there's any questions. So if it's not an HCE if the access card didn't make it to the set. We talk about set later. So for instance, if you draw 3 cards from access to recall, and then you accidentally flip one over, then that would actually be treated as looking extra card instead. That is because the extra card that you flipped over didn't actually make it to the hand. You can make an actual distinction that it's still actually part of the library. You just happen to like flip it over and see the content of it. So it would be more appropriate to keep out looking extra card violation instead. The same case can be, say, like if you pick up a card and you haven't actually like put it into your hand yet, and that's kind of like in IPG, it does have some gray area. So please use your judgment to see like if the card has been added to the set or not, or you can still, it's still part of the original set. It will be more clear when I go over sets in the later slide. And again, always look for the cause of the problem. So in this example, let's say somehow you drew 4 cards from Brainstorm by tapping a volcanic island with a blood moon out. Okay, you actually end up with more cards in your hand because you incorrectly drew more cards than you're supposed to from Brainstorm. But actually, the problem would be that you're actually incorrectly casting Brainstorm instead. So in this case, you can actually handle it as the GRV instead of having it as HCE. Because the root cause of the problem is not drawing the extra card, it's actually incorrectly casting Brainstorm when that player cannot. Okay. So let's do a little pop quiz on identifying the situation, if it's a hidden card error or not. I will just go over some of this really quickly. So let's say I have a Grizzly Salvage out. I play a Grizzly Salvage and flip over 6 cards one at a time. And I point out that she should have been 5 cards instead. What would be the infraction here? So if you guys are thinking that it's an LEC, like most of the chat is saying, then you are correct. Because, like I said, the 6th card can actually be seen with confidence. All the card is actually visible to both parties. So you just take the 6th card and then shuffle it back to the library. Next one. casting Elven Visionary with double blue, and then draw a card when the ETB ability resolve. What would be a violation here? If we don't know the 6 card Sugeng, that would actually be GIV. Because the content is actually revealed to everyone, right? Okay, good. This is GIV, yes, because you are incorrectly casting Elven Visionary. All right, you guys on fire. Maybe I should not have been doing this at all. You guys already know it. Okay, player casting Divination while controlling Spirit of Deliverance. What is the infliction here? Very good, guys. Okay, so I throw a little bit of curveball here because he is actually the one controlling it, so he owns the effect. So therefore, this is hidden card error because the person who's committing the error himself actually control the prevention effect. So therefore, this is an HCE. Assuming he actually drew a crew card. Yeah, assuming. Yeah, that's correct. What happens if opponent has a Spirit of Deliverance? Then the opponent would need to try to stop the person casting Divination from drawing instead, because you can still cast Divination, you just can't draw from it, right? So the controller, if it's the opponent, can you say, okay, it's resolved, but you drew no card. Yep, exactly. Yes, UP opponent needs to acknowledge that. Yeah. Okay, that's actually pretty good, guys. So is any question you guys want to toss out before I go over into the philosophy and fixes?
New.
Yes,
I got one
sir.
question.
Yes.
One thing that perhaps you can explain the fixes for GRV and HDE. What is the main differences, and why it seems like HDE has a more severe or severe fix compared to a GRV?
Right. So GRV, usually you do like a backup, right? Either you do a partial backup, you do a part backup. So like for example, if you drew too many from Brainstorm and you need to do a GRV fixes, you actually randomly put a card back, right? If you drew an extra and it's GRV, you put a card back. You don't show the information to the player, to the opponent. AC is more severe because when you show, because usually you do a Dorsey's fix, like you have to show your hand, and once you show your hand, you cannot take that information back. Opponent already have access to that information, so that's why we need to be more careful when giving out that information, because content in your hand is hidden information. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Cool. WeiJia, what if player while drawing his first card flip it over accident and add to hand and proceed to draw the second card correctly in second card properly? So he flips it over and then put it into his hand, right? Then that will be AC. Oh, right. Okay, so he knows the content. I would probably be giving out ACE, because even if you don't know the content of the card that he flips over, he's still putting cards into his hand illegally. So we just happen to know the content because it's got flipped over. He added more card than he should have to, so that would still be ACE fix. Okay, so let's go over sets first, because this is important about the fix. A set is distinctive set of cards or group of cards that is defined by the game rule or the effects. So it's the card that you draw for a turn in the set, card in your library and your graveyard is the set, card that created by spells or effect is a set. For example, card revealed by effect of fiction is a set. And if you're holding one of my card in your hand, card in your hand is also a set. A set is only need to have a single card in it. And the most important thing is a card can only belong to one set at a time. So there's no in between. That just make it more cut clear for us to make a ruling. So for example, if you draw a card from your library, it's not a part of your hand until it is actually seen by you or have been added to your hand, right? Before at that point, if you pick it up and it's still hovering over on top of the library, it's still considered to be part of the top of your library. Again, there's some gray area there. You just need to make a judgment to see if you can actually clearly see or clearly identify where the card is belong to a particular set or not. Okay. Right. So to understand ACV HCE philosophy, we need to take the still thing into consideration first. We cannot fix or reverse the game state, right? Because we cannot have the information to do so. Player draw an extra card. We do not know what that extra card is. We just happen to know it's somewhere in the hand, right? Only the player committed the infraction has this information. The player that committed an infraction also gained information he or she are not supposed to, thus gain an unfair advantage. Therefore, when we're doing ACE fix, we need to involve the opponent or the other players to participate in the fix. That's just so we can minimize the advantage that is gained by getting access to the hidden information, and also provide a good incentive for the player not to abuse this rule, right? Okay, so the general fix is to basically put the card where it belongs. So if the players have 6 cards instead of 5, then we need to put a card back at was not supposed to be there. So usually this is commonly known as a thought seeds fix. That player will have to reveal his or her hand, have the opponent choose the card that is considered to be the extra one, and then extra card will be shuffled into the library if it was an extra draw. Yes. Also, we can use previous information that is known to us to both parties before we apply the fix. So, for example, if a player has searched a plane from a Knight of the White Orchard's ability, and he actually drew too many cards from Thirst for Meaning, we can actually safely say, okay, the plane is a card that's supposed to be there. We will exclude that from the selection if both parties agrees to it. So we take out the plane from the selection, do a thought seeds fix, put the plane back, and then proceed from there. If possible, try to operate on the smallest set possible, given that you can correctly identify them. So a good example would this be, let's say, sorry, I forgot to fix this. You pick up 4 cards from collected company, right? So let's say you pick up 4 cards, and then you proceed to pick up 3 more. We can safely say the first 4 is good, right? Because collected company said, look at the top 6. You already looked at the top 4. And then while you're supposed to look at 2 more, you actually pick up 3. So instead of applying the whole fix to the whole set, which is 7, you can say, okay, we're not going to look at the first 4 because first 4 is good. We're just going to look at the second set instead, which is 3. So the opponent will get to look at the 3 cards, the second set, and then just pick 1 card out of that set and then just shovel back to the library. And then that player will just get to resolve collected company from there. A little bit extra, just so you guys get the idea. So what would happen if you actually pick up 3 first and then 4? What would happen? Just have a little think before I take some water. Okay. So if you actually pick up 3 and then pick up 4, then you only had to make a selection on the second set. Yeah, it's the same scenario. You just operate on a different set. Because first 3 is good. The second 4, you just pick a card out of that one. Yep, you guys are good. Okay, so those are like the fixes. Oh, okay, there's one more. So this is what Sugeng was talking about. So if the card is put into public and the order is preserved, we can promptly put the card back to where it belongs. This infraction can be handled as GIV instead. So this is, for example, when you mill the card, if you mill an extra one, say you're supposed to mill 5 cards, you mill 6. Usually it's the top card on the graveyard pile, right? Just by the nature of you doing the milling effect, you can just pick the top card, which is a 6 card, and then just shuffle back in the library. Now we're just going to go over some additional remedy that can be applied when we're doing the ACE fix. So, for example, in some cases we not only drawing the card, right? You're moving the card around. So such as like when we're doing rummage, we're doing loot, or in case of brainstorm, you put 3 cards in your hand and put 2 back. If there's an error that occurs, let's say you draw 4 cards on brainstorm and then put 2 back, we need to do a little backup just to the point that the error has occurred. We're not doing a full backup. We're just doing backup because those 2 cards that we put back on brainstorm need to be considered part of the problematic set. So we need to put 2 back first and then make a fix. So this is to ensure that the affected cards are being reconstructed and the fix can be applied as fairly as possible. So in this case, you would put 2 back, have an opponent choose which one is the extra card, shuffle it back into the library, and then continue to resolve brainstorm from there. But if the set is not possible to be reconstructed, that additional remedy is not to be applied. So for example, the usual case would be once a player, once he brainstorm, he'll just crack fetch, right? So if he draw 4 and put 2 back and then crack fetch, we can no longer have the information where the top 2 card is now. So we will just have to ignore it and just do a regular toss-it fix just to get the hand into the correct number of cards. I would also, if this happened frequently and if you think there's an intention to abuse here, you can always try to go deeper into the investigation. But I'm not going to go over that here. Okay, another case would be, let's say you're supposed to rummage, but you loot instead. So an elegant fix with this would be you actually review your hand and that the opponent chooses which card that he's supposed to have drawn. So that card will be taken out of the selection, and then the player will need to discard a card and then added the card that he previously selected into the hand instead. So he selected a card that cannot be discarded. Just so players don't draw, because the card that you're supposed to draw later cannot be discarded, right? That's just so that you don't, when you loot and you rummage, when you rummage, but you loot instead, you don't try and abuse this. You don't try to abuse it. Okay. Some cards will have an effect that require players to view. So for example, cards like Stoneforge Mystic, for example, let's say I activated Dominant Red first ability, and then instead of looking, I looked at it and then added to my hand directly. So what would we do is we would have an opponent chooses which card that is supposed to be the review card. So in this case, open your hand, choose a card that's supposed to be reviewed from Dominant Red's ability, and then put it back on top of the library, and then have a player reperform this ability. So so if the opponent is smart, right, he would not put a creature card on top of the library. So so that player cannot add it to his hand. But again, if the original creation, if recreating the original set is not able and is too disruptive, then just leave the card in the hand. And there's one potential upgrade for the ACE, and that is dealing with morph. That is because if you incorrectly cast this morph face down, that is actually really open up the door for players to abuse, and is very disruptive to the game state. So the only way they will get away with incorrectly casting a morph is, let's say you have 2 cards in hand, one has morph, one doesn't. He actually put a card without morph into the battlefield and call the judge immediately, and that is okay. But if he or she put a incorrect card in the hand, drew an extra card, or some other action has passed, then that is a potential, that is an upgrade, because now we cannot identify, say, oh, it's just a cause of dexterity error. You just happen to put the wrong card into the battlefield, right? So if such case happened, like say it was a dexterity error, just swap out the card with morph, and as a judge doing the swap, the opponent can just verify the legitimacy of the swap, so the player does not need to review the morph card until at the end of the game when he's supposed to. Okay. Yep. So those are what is actually in IPG. I just broke it down for you. So if you, want to do a review, these are only in the IPG. I think I did went a little fast, so I got a little bit carried away. So if there is no question about that section, let's dive into some scenarios. Let's take an example out of New Capenna. So Amy attacked with Raffine and 2 other creatures. She put the Raffine trigger connivability on a stack, and on resolution, she drew 4 cards instead of 3. What would be the infraction and what would happen here? So if you're thinking that is an ACE, you are correct. Just apply the Thor stick. Oh, sorry, I went too far. Just apply the Thor stick and shuffle the extra card into the library. If she has already discarded 4 cards from the ability, then you need to do a rollback. So return those cards to the hand before doing the fix. Okay, here's something that probably happened a lot in EDH. Nicole casted Enlightened Tutor during Amy end step and forget to review the card she got before putting on top of her library. Nicole then untap her opponent and proceed to the drawer. At this point, Amy realized that Nicole didn't review what she searched for. So take a few moments to think about some possibility that what we're gonna do in this situation. So there are a few possible scenarios for this. If it's put on top, even though we don't know the content, the location is known. So if she hasn't actually drew the card, or we can correctly like say she just like pick it up and haven't put it into her hand, just turn it over and then see if it's actually the card that she actually is supposed to search for, because we can use the information that it's supposed to be on the top, is the location is known, so we can use that to see if the card is correct or not. Yeah, and that would just actually be failure to maintain a game state. And yes, if it's easier, and then resolve it as regular IEL. But if he actually put it to her hand, because now we don't know if it's actually a top card or not. So we have no way to verify that it's actually what she actually put on top, then just do a Dorsey's fix. Okay, this one. This is an interesting one. So let's say Amy say to Wayfinder into the battlefield, she revealed 4 cards, so 2 forests, 2 swamps, and then she incorrectly put all 4 cards into her hand, and Nicole calls the judge. What would be the infringement here? If you're thinking GIV, it is correct, because the content of the card is actually known. Those cards has been reviewed properly. So if she put 4 cards directly into her hand, that would be ACE. But in this case, the content is known, and you can use that information to fix this problem. So just rewind, put the 2 swamp and 2 frost back, and then just have Amy pick a card out of it. If there is a case that opponent cannot remember what is revealed, but if she did review it properly, if the player did review them properly, they should not actually be further penalized for for this. And if they cannot agree, then you should base judgment as a judge. Okay, this one. Amy activated Elivic's second ability, but forget to reveal the card before putting it into her hand. What is the infringement? And have a think about what you're supposed to do in this situation. It is an HCE, but remember, if there is a card that is not being reviewed, we need to reperform that action, right? So in this case, we know where the you look at a sub 6, and you may put a creature card. You will review a creature card and put it into your hand, and shuffle the other cards into the bottom of your library. So in this case, we know the 5 cards in the bottom of your library is the card for this problematic set, right? So you grab 5 of those, and then review the hand. Have the opponent choose the card that's supposed to be the review card, add it to the 5 that was shuffled to the bottom. So now you actually have the 6th card that's supposed to be a top 6 card of your library, and then have the player reperform that action. So if an opponent is smart, he probably not going to pick. He probably pick a land or something, or that's just assuming, right? Pick a land card to be part of the 6. So the opponent would need to make another decision there. So this is also in the IPG is I don't remember which paragraph is it, but it did say that if a player fails to review, you would need to do a rewind and reconstruct that set. Okay, and this is the last one. Okay, Amy casts Majestic Metamorph on her treasure token. In response, Nicole casts Shatter on it. So Amy allows Shatter to resolve and asks Nicole draw from Majestic, and Nicole says sure. So what would be the infraction here? Is GRV, and because they both agree, and that is correct. Yeah, I saved the easy one for last. Yeah, so in this case, it's a GRV because both players agree to it and they both acknowledge the action. So in this case of GRV, just do a simple backup if the game state has not progressed too far. Yeah, I think as I would say a simple backup would be suffice. But again, if you want to do a backup, always call for a head judge. And actually the end of my presentation. Look like you guys got a pretty good grasp of each scenarios and actually identify most of the situation correctly. So I think that's pretty good. If there's anything that is opening up to discussion, I'm willing to like take the question now.
Yep. So before we can go to additional questions, there's something that usually come up during competitive REL where judges actually do make a big mistake. So the scenario is two players are starting the game and while deciding for a mulligan, let's say player A actually finds out, hey, I actually drew 8 cards. No, you should not rule a HC for that because there's actually one particular IPG portion for that particular error, which is 2.4 gameplay error, mulligan procedure error. All right, don't do a HC and force the guy to actually review his hand and go and toxic fix it because you cannot recover from the kind of mistake.
You can though, right? I think you can either have told them they can take another mulligan to get their hand correctly to the correct size, right?
Yep. So mulligan procedure error, the fix is actually having the guy do force mulligan.
Yeah. I think I got that one. Yeah, but he want to keep the hand. We need to do ACE fix, right?
Beg your pardon.
So he draw 8, right? And then he wants to actually keep the hand. He likes that hand. He needs to show the opponent that make an opponent say, okay, which one's the extra one?
That will actually be a deviation, which I don't really recommend.
Okay.
So we make him take a mulligan.
All right. I think most players would rather take a mulligan than have an opponent see their hand anyway, if it's a competitive one.
Okay, so that's something I wanted to highlight because I actually seen some judges doing it in regular REL, although you shouldn't do that in the regular REL, but just wanted to correct it. So I think are there any more questions?
Yes, force mulligan.
Force mulligan means he shuffle everything back in and draw 7 cards.
Yeah. And if it is the second, if it's his second mulligan, he needs to put 2 back or 3 back, depends on how many he actually already did.
So yeah, the reason also for not doing that strange thing of like I like this hand, I want to keep it, is like by drawing 8 cards, basically you have a way huge sample that what you should have. So basically it's easier to get a better hand if you have 8 cards and you can pick like 6 out of them than if you like have to redo it from 7 cards. So this is the philosophy of why this is not a fix at all. So don't. Thank you.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's like a lot of sense.
So actually, I think we have one question way earlier in the presentation, but now we have to move on until the Q&A session. So basically, WeiJia was asking, what if a player while drawing his first card, flick his first card over accidentally, and then adds it to his hand, then proceed to draw the second card, what would he do?
Right. I think I see a question like this on the Judge Academy. It was what would happen if someone drew from Vidalian click, even though opponent chooses not to replace a card, even though the content of the hand is known because you show the hand free from Vidalian click, right? In a usual case, that card should not have been drawn anyway. We just happen to know the content. So in that case, it was an ACE, not an LEC, even though we know, or a GRV, even though we know the content of the whole hand. So I think with what WeiJia was saying is you flip a card, right? And then you still draw the incorrect number of card. I think that's how he worded it. That would still be an ACE because you drew, the root card is you drew too many cards, even though you know the content of one of them anyway.
So of course, I think the other important portion is you work with the smallest set possible. So, for the Vidalian click scenario, you already know the rest of the hand, set it aside and fix the one card.
Yeah.
Which is quite easy. And as for WeiJia's example, since the first card that should be correctly drawn is been reviewed to everyone, set that aside and fix the current hand.
Yep. Yeah.
Will the reviewed card be considered as a LEC? No, right?
Looking at extra cards, I mean, if you are there is no error in you playing with your hand open.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a question that I wanted to like have more awareness about, because that happens quite often. For some reason, like last time in my judging days, if you were to if someone were to draw a card, he's a bit nervous, he just accidentally flips over the card and then he quickly adds it to his hand, which is correct. And then the second thing happens, which he thought that he forgot to draw his card by a slip of mind, and then he draws an extra card.
Okay, Warren is asking about the case where Enlightened Tutor, he didn't review the card and drawing it, and then you notice the error. So the card is actually into the hand. So what would you do is have the opponent chooses a card out of the hand and then put it back into the library, and then have the caster of the Enlightened Tutor do the tutoring again. So if opponent pick a card that was not an equipment card, he would have to actually pick another card from the library. This is actually so the funny thing is, you might, if you search for this kind of situation on the internet, what's the infraction? The infraction is still HCE because she did not review the card she's supposed to, right? And because she didn't review the card supposed to, this falls into the IPG that says if the player failed to review a card, you would just have to recreate. You pick the card that's supposed to be reviewed and then put it back where it should have been. So the card that she picked out of the library, so it should have been put it back into the library before she. Can you switch to Enlightened Tutor? Yes. Sorry. Enlightened Tutor. Okay. Where was I? So you would pick a card, right, and then return it where it should have been. Yeah. So she. Okay. Let me rephrase this again. Let me get my thought. But she searched for a card, put it on top, incorrectly putting it into her hand without review. So that is an HCE. So basically, it's a failure she didn't review the card that she searched for, and we can't find it again. So what would we do is open the hand, have the opponent pick a card that's supposed to be the review card, and then put it back into where it's supposed to come from. It's supposed to come from the library, put it back into the library, and have the players who committed the error make another search again. I hope I explained that a little bit better. What if it's happened in EDH regular REL? So, I mean, we're not gonna give out any error, right? So I would say to prevent people just picking up cards that are not supposed to. I mean, we still have to encourage them to make the correct play, right? So I would still do the same fixes. The card that the opponent would need to pick would need to be an artifact or enchantment. Is that correct? No, the opponent can just pick anything. He can pick a land if he wanted to, or pick another good card out of the hand and then put it back into the library, just so that the caster need to pick another card or have to make another choice.
Okay, so I guess for the REL, regular REL portion, yes, if that's what the players want, you know, to have a KC fix and they all agree on it, you know, it's fine. But else regular REL, you know, we try to have a fix that is fair to everyone.
Yeah.
Particularly in EDH.
I mean, we still need to try to get them to play properly, like, so I think that's appropriate. My IP is a bit rusty. Got to read it again because I feel like GLV could have prevented by asking what a card you pick for Enlightened Tutor. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but it's the way I look at it is because it's a responsibility for the person who casting Enlightened Tutor to actually, you know, show it. So I think you do have a point there. In Drumming case, pay your review and put in hand immediately, but the opponent game is not revealed. What's your suggestion? Nobody saw see what's happened. That would actually be. This would be more like doing investigation, right, CJ?
Oh, for the Domri case?
Yeah. So if the player actually reveal, but the opponent claim it's not revealed. That I think that's another beast altogether. That would be more under doing investigation.
So one guy reviewed and the opponent say that he did not review.
Yeah, nobody saw it.
Then you know, I mean, every call is an investigation after all. So you know, you have to try to see what exactly happened. And of course, you can usually, you know, in a tournament there are people around. Well, I don't really like to ask what happened, you know, to people around what exactly happened. You know, I think for this one, you know, you can ask, you know, did anyone see if you know, the player reviewed? Yeah, and of course, most of the time, this happens usually when the opponent forgot exactly what was the card. So most of the time, it could be as simple as having the Domri player review the creature card.
Okay.
And you can just move on.
Wait, sorry. Wait, so in this case, can you repeat? So you don't. What do you do? Because you kind of fade off at the end, CJ.
So the last part will be, you know, most of the time this happened because the Domri opponent either didn't see the card or, you know, the card was like flashed very quickly and then he, you know, he thought it was a certain card and then he want to confirm again. So usually just have the Domri player review the exact card to his opponent.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
And just let it carry on.
Okay, so this is like a would be recommended, right?
I think you got cut off a bit.
So this is like a deviation from what would be recommended, right?
I wouldn't even give an infraction actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it is the case of, you know, the Domri player revealing, but, you know, he's like at the top of the library, he just review, oh, now it's a creature, then he may put in the hand. Usually the opponent will say, oh, I didn't see it. Okay, review again. Usually that is the case. So just have the Domri player revealing it. No. Sometimes, you know, the opponent want to, hey, I want to see again, I will write it down. Most of the time is this case. But of course, you know, if it's in a scenario where one player say, you know, yeah, like what Sugeng said, is too fast. So if it's a case of, you know, one player revealing, the other one, the opponent say, you know, he did not review at all, then maybe you have to probe further. That's what she said. So, okay. Yeah, I don't understand.
Okay.
But yeah, okay.
Ken. Okay. Last question by Kenji. That's about communication. I think. Okay. I think it was communicated already. Okay.
Yep. So does anyone have any other questions? I guess not. All right. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you,
for
everyone.
your AC presentation. So actually, I have something to show. It's actually on Ryan V's. Okay, let me share my screen. Yep, this one. So actually on Ryan V's question, on Academy Manufacturer and the Go Hound. So now Michael actually shared with me this particular post by Jess Dunks, who is none other than our current rules manager. So yeah, if you are creating a token copy of Go Hound, apparently it will be replaced by a carrying manufacturer's replacement effect, and you'll create one of each regular predefined tokens. So you will not get a Go Hound, but you'll get a treasure, you'll get what's the thing called, a clue and a food. So I guess that was my mistake, because I was comparing it exactly with Son from Adventures of the Forgotten Realm. So Ryan, I hope you are there and you can see my correction right here. Yep. So that's actually the answer to your question. And let me copy and paste the. So basically, the link to the exact Reddit response from Jess Dunks is right there in the chat. Okay, so I think now it's about 5:18 or 4:18 in Jakarta and Bangkok. So I guess we can now have a break, and then we come back at 5:30 or 4:30, depending on where you are. All right, now we will go over to Sugeng on Myth Triggers.
Hey,
Sugeng
before
is
that,
very
Kevin,
excited.
CJ, before that, I think there was one last question that Sugeng posed that maybe perhaps Neil or anyone else can answer with regards to the HCE, the Jace one.
Wouldn't that be like you're supposed to loot and then between loot you rummage? Because he's supposed to draw this card and draw this card, and then instead draw 2 cards, discard 1.
Guess he called a judge during, like, after he draws his second card,
When did he discard? He discard, draw 2 cards, discard, or he draw 1, discard.
The correct effect is draw 1, discard 1, then draw another 1 and discard 1, right?
Yeah.
And he draws 2 cards and then he discarded 1 and then he just, oh wait, I'm supposed to draw 1, discard 1 twice. So he called a judge on himself.
Yeah.
And did this during one of the competitive event, I guess.
One sec, I'm getting attacked by my cat for having food.
Okay.
Oh, cat.
Yeah, stupid cat. I mean, that's actually a lot of information that is accessed, right? I'm actually kind of leaning towards HCE if it's me, yeah, because he drawing a card that he not supposed to before he made an action that is the discard, right?
Okay.
So that's for me anyway. Yeah, that's how I see it.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess it's actually a game rule violation, to be honest, because rather than he did it the other way around. So actually he's actually not doing exactly what the card is trying to tell him to do. So GRV, and I'll just do a backup on that.
Okay.
So for this one, right, when they do backup, right, CJ, when they do a backup, right, how do we go back up the discard and draw thing. Do we do the top Cs again?
So exactly what happened in the error. I think the person discard then draw, right?
It's supposed to be draw one, discard one, then another draw one, discard one. He stopped after. I mean, he draws 2 cards and then discard.
So the guy draw 2 cards instead and discard 2.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So if the guy draws 2 cards and discard 2, have the 2 discarded cards go back to hand. Then randomly.
No, the guy only discarded 1.
Beg your pardon?
The guy only discarded 1.
Oh. Then there's then just basically return the 1 that he discarded. Randomly put 2 back on top and have him trigger it correctly. So it'll be draw 1, discard 1, draw 1, discard 1. After you have reversed everything.
So hey guys, so I will have my I'm monitoring the chat on my phone. So if you have anything, just type it out. Also, I'm trying to create be active in here. So if you need the mic to talk, just raise your hand or say in the chat that you need the mic. So I'll let you guys have the mic if you want to talk. Okay. All right. Before we start, my name is Sugeng. I'm level 2 from Surabaya in Indonesia. So one easy part of the IPG is actually mistrigger. So I'll start with introductory to trigger abilities, okay? What do you guys know about trigger ability? Could you guys type it in the chat, please? It has when, whenever, at, yes. The correct one is actually when or whenever, usually followed by condition. At usually followed by a phase or steps. It can trigger anytime. The ability is put on the stack before player receive priority or AP and AP. Okay. All right, mistrigger. So the philosophy of mistrigger is a trigger ability triggers, but the player controlling the ability doesn't demonstrate awareness of the trigger existence by the first time it would affect the game in a visible fashion. So basically, the player who controls the trigger doesn't remember. So or doesn't show that he remembers the trigger. Let me show you guys with a video.
And that's totally reasonable.
Can you guys hear the voice?
To sideboarding specifically for Bant Eldrazi, because it's a deck that wins or loses fundamentally strategically. So you just choose a small number of matchups you want to beat with your sideboard.
So I'm going to pause you here. I think Frank was trying to do that. He has mulliganed to 4 in our 3rd game. See how this goes. Brushland from Frank. Kent then plays Conflagrate for 0.
Well, I believe he picked up Rest in Peace off the top, presumably keeping on 4 because there were lands.
And he Rest in Pieces.
He's got enough hits where drawing into it, you know, within turn 1, 2, or 3 was totally reasonable with Ancient Stirrings in a Grafdigger's Cage or just the 4 copies of Rest in Peace.
Can you guys hear the voice, or is the voice too small?
Do the same.
Yeah, so it's going to really depend on what Vanderwall
is able
to do to follow this up.
Okay.
All right, we're going to have a judge call here just for a second.
So when you cast, when Rest in Peace enters the battlefield, it's a trigger to exile all graveyards. I assume the question is whether or not this trigger was announced.
Frank has to say it. He has to say exile the graveyards.
Right.
There's this issue where Kent physically moved the card with his fingers. So, yeah, we'll see what the judge ruling is on here.
That's something to certainly keep in mind.
Ken Burrow L3s cage, and that's totally reasonable.
And I like this approach to sideboarding specifically for Bant Eldrazi.
Basically, as you see, Frank Vanderwall casts Rest in Peace, and then he doesn't tell the opponent basically the effect triggers and then exile the graveyard. So because he doesn't say that, and he just say go, and then the opponent doesn't exile the graveyard, right? So that's what the one example of mistrigger. Then how do we show awareness? How do we tell the other player that we know the effect triggers? For example, if the effect has, if the trigger ability has a target or mode or other choices on triggering, the player has to tell it before passing the priority. For example, Titan of Industry. If Titan of Industry enters the battlefield, the ETB triggers, right? You have to either, hey, I choose these two, or I gain 5 life, or I create a Rhino and put a shield counter. You have to choose those two of the modes. There's an exception to these. If the target is target opponent, it's automatically remembered. Okay. The next one, if the trigger ability causes a change in the visible game state or requires a choice upon resolutions, he must do that before doing anything else. Let's say light pause, you cast an aura attached to one of your creatures. When you when the effect, you actually have to search for aura and then attach it to light pause, so your opponent knows that the trigger is off. Enoch says, can you give an example how a trigger that targets opponent can be missed? One of the Eldrazi Emrakul, the new Emrakul, the one that costs 15, it says gain control target opponent, right? When you cast the Eldrazi. So let's say you cast Emrakul, you don't have to say targets you. You just say, and then during your opponent turn, you can say, hey, I gain control of your turn. You can say that without telling the opponent that the ability triggers. Is that clear enough? That's one of the most common one. Unless you're playing multiplayer. For the competitive realm, it's usually based for one-on-one. So we don't do these for multiplayer Magic. So this is actually Comrel usually for one-on-one only. So that's why the target opponent one is excluded from demonstrating awareness. Okay. All right. What changes are visible game states? Usually life total. So you can just scratch out. If you scratch off your life total, change it. That means you're showing the ability actually has effects, or putting counters or tokens, or exiling cards in graveyards, or doing something in hand. If you draw a card, that's showing awareness, or anything on the battlefield. Okay. All right. So the next one. If the effect of the trigger ability changes the rule of the game, you have to acknowledge the ability, the effect. Or if an opponent trying to take an illegal doing something illegal, you have to prevent that opponent. Okay. For example, if you have Garnisher and then 2 other creatures enter the battlefield under your control this turn, during combat, you can just attack with Llanowar Elf. And then if your opponent blocks with a 3/3 beast token, during damage step, you can tell your opponent they both die, because the Llanowar Elf has Death Touch. So that's one way to show that there's a change of rules of the game. Next one. If the effect of the trigger ability affects the game state in a non-visible way, tell your opponent when it's affecting it, when the changes happen. An example, freelance muscle. Let's say you have a freelance muscle while having a Lanora elf. You attack with the freelance muscle. If your opponent says take 4, you can say take 5 instead. That means you acknowledge freelance muscle gets +1/+1 from the Lanora elf, if he's the only other elf, the other creatures you have. All right. So if it's rest in peace, like the video that you guys see, what do you guys think we should do? What should the player actually have to do to show that rest in peace trigger? If you need the mic, if you want to talk, just raise your hand or say it in chat. You can type it in the chat. Tell the opponent to exile their graveyard. Yes, that's one way. Number 2, change the visible game state since the card in the graveyard moves to exile. Yes, you can. It's your opponent's. If it's the opponent's graveyard, tell him to exile it. How about if, let's say, I have 2 cards in my graveyard. My opponent has 3 cards in their graveyard. How can I change how can I show my opponent that the rip triggers? If I exile the card in my graveyard, can I do that? Can I show my opponent that the trigger happens, that I acknowledge the trigger? What do you guys think? Exiling my own graveyard is an acknowledgement of the trigger. Yep, it is. What should a judge do with the missed trigger? Look, trigger ability are common and invincible. It's not like token that you can see. It's not like a land or anything like you can see on the board. So players should not be harshly penalized for forgetting one. So the penalty is nothing. But remember that players are expected to remember their own trigger. So the opponent are not required to point out the trigger abilities they don't control, but they can if they want to. Also that we judges do not interfere on trigger ability unless we want to give a warning or investigate for the possibility of cheating. Okay. The reason is that we don't want to remind the players for their trigger. If a spectator points it out, remember that it's count as outside assistance. The penalty could be a match loss. Okay, the basic of the penalty is nothing, right? There's no penalty. But if the player missed their detrimental trigger, the penalty is upgraded into warning. If the ability has no effect or it does nothing on the resolution, the player don't have to acknowledge it, even though it's detrimental trigger. Let's say Black Market Tycoon. If you have no treasure at all, you don't have to say, hey, it triggers on my upkeep. You can just go draw a card. Okay. Remember that if a player is intentionally missing his trigger, it could be cheating. Do an investigation. It might be. Who knows? All right. What happens if player forget 2 times of detrimental trigger? It's an upgrade. First one is warning. 2 times should be another warning, right? And the third one should be upgraded into game loss. Should we? But if player forgetting more than once, it could be they're trying to intentionally missing the trigger, Wendra. So I guess we have to investigate for cheating also. Okay. If you control a player, you're responsible for their their trigger too. All right, let's do a bit exercise on beneficial and detrimental. A trigger ability can be either beneficial or detrimental. A beneficial usually the trigger ability gives benefit, while detrimental usually gives a bad effect. How about Ocnis? Ocnis' second ability, is it a beneficial or detrimental? What do you guys think? Beneficial, yes, it is. It is beneficial. It gives a free treasure token. Okay, Kenji, I'll go back to my slaver one. So if you control a player, you are responsible for their trigger.
Yeah. My audio is on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just like to check, right? So if, say, for example, I am controlling, say, CJ via Mindslaver, I am responsible for the permanents that CJ controls, but is CJ, being the player control, right, is he obliged to remind me that there are triggers that I should be aware of? Say, for example, if the cards are new or in a foreign language, for example.
Wait. CJ, you control CJ, right?
That's correct. So, according to this, I am responsible for CJ's triggers.
Yes.
Is CJ, as the player, obliged to tell me, the person who is controlling him, if, say, I am, here are some of the cards that have triggers?
Wait. I think so. Yes, my opinion says yes.
So I can, so if, for example, I Mindslaver CJ, I can get CJ to help me with the triggers, even though he is my opponent.
So you control CJ. There's something on CJ's board that triggers, right?
That's correct.
Responsible for triggers means if something triggers, you have to put it on the stack. You cannot say, "Oh, I forgot."
Yes, correct. But
so
I understand that part. Is CJ obliged to tell me anything, or is it such that, say, for example, if CJ controls Bitter Blossom, I Mindslaver CJ. On his upkeep, maybe because the Bitter Blossom is not a card that I play in my deck or something, or I don't recognize it, and then I move to, say, the from the upkeep, we move forward, and then CJ calls Judge, saying that Judge, he missed the Bitter Blossom trigger while he was Mindslavering me.
Okay, Bitter Blossom is beneficial for CJ, detrimental for you. So I think Bitter Blossom should be, if you forget Bitter Blossom, that's a warning for you.
Then
I think.
does the Mindslaver opponent get any infraction or anything? Because they never say, they while they are not obliged to provide information to me, but they also they clearly didn't say anything also.
Okay, so I don't think so. On that question, I don't think CJ has to remind you on that, because you're controlling the CJ, right?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Okay, yeah, thank you.
So, okay. Ocnis is beneficial, all right. So that's quite easy, right? How about Shakedown Heavy's second ability? Is it beneficial or detrimental?
Check. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, first is beneficial if you would want to draw at the moment, but detrimental if you don't need to draw, but you only want to kill your opponent.
Okay.
That's
so,
basically the what if.
It depends.
Yes.
Maybe. Okay. Chris Yu, beneficial. Chris, beneficial, are you asking beneficial or is it maybe the beneficial?
I'm not exactly sure, because basing on what do you call that? What's that 2/1 creature? The one that draw but lose life one. What's the judge promo creature? I forgot. Dark Confident. It should be considered as beneficial regardless. So in this case, I guess it should be beneficial, but I'm quite unsure.
Okay. Dark Confident. Okay. Mike says detrimental. Could you elaborate why you say it's detrimental, Mike? Okay, I'll just move on. Okay, so this is how you see if something is beneficial or not, or detrimental. Let's just delete the ability. What do you think Shakedown Heavy without the second ability? Would it be playable? Would it be good? Power creep so well. Yes, it is. So it is really, really good. So if you put the ability in, does the ability prevent it dealing damage? It should. If you put Shakedown Heavy on the deck, you're gonna use it to beat your opponent down, right? With 6 damage menace each turn. So if you put the ability in, is it preventing his purpose? So one of the judges, W. Elliott, mentioned, if you delete the ability, would people play the card? If the answer is no, most likely it's beneficial. All right. So for Shakedown Heavy, if we delete the card, the Shakedown Heavy would be really, really overpowerful, right? So it's detrimental. Okay. Any question on that? I'll play it without the trigger. Yes. I'll go back playing mono black if Shakedown Heavy doesn't have the second ability. Okay. All right. How about next one? Eidolon of Great Revel, Chalice of the Void, and Holy Mind. Is it beneficial or detrimental? These are most Eidolon of Great Revel is used on almost on some format, like Pioneer use them. I think Modern is use it also. Chalice of the Void, Modern staple, I think. Holy Mind is, I don't see it unless it's on Turbo Land, Turbo Fog. So all of them are beneficial. Depends on who's triggering it, probably. Beneficial, all beneficial. Chalice, some cheat. I want to sneak in a spell it can counter. All right, let's discuss this one by one. Eidolon's ability affects both player, right? If I use those cards, it means it's beneficial for me. Okay. All right, let's discuss this way. Eidolon affects both player. Let's say if you cast shock, you will get shock, right? Also, right? If your opponent shocks you, he will get shock, right? If you're the control of the Eidolon, the ability actually is bad for you. But if it doesn't trigger for your opponent, it's good for them, right? So this is what we call symmetrical ability. It depends who gets affected by the card, the ability. If you Shocking. Yes, it is. It is. So in this case, if you control the Eidolon, if you cast a spell with CMC 3 or less, you have to remember the trigger because it's detrimental for you. It's bad for you. If your opponent casts a spell, it's your trigger. It's good for your opponent if you forget. So in this case, you can forget for your opponent because it's beneficial for them. But you cannot forget for yourself. It's detrimental for you. Similar things with Chalice of the Void. Let's say Chalice for 0, and then you cast something cost 0. You cannot forget that the Chalice will counter the spell. But if your opponent casts something with CMC 0, you can forget that. You cannot forget that for yourself, but you can forget for your opponent. Same thing for Holy Mind. Holy Mind affects your opponent, giving him an extra draw, and giving you also an extra draw, right? While it gives you a draw, it's beneficial for you. If it gives your opponent a draw, it's detrimental for you. So you cannot forget telling your opponent to draw an extra card, but you can forget to draw a card, the additional draw from Holy Mind. Is that clear enough? Any questions on the symmetrical ability? Correct, because it's our responsibility for our cards or abilities in here. Remember, the philosophy says a player must remember their own trigger, right? Any questions for the beneficial and detrimental? No questions? For Holy Mind case, if I forgot to remind my opponent, you will get a warning because it's detrimental for you. It's mistrigger and warning. Sorry, you will. The base is no penalty, right? Because it's detrimental for you, it gets upgraded into warning. Okay. Any other questions? All right. I'll start with what happens if a mistrigger happens. How do we fix it? First one, if the trigger ability is an enters the battlefield trigger from aura that affects only the enchanted permanent and cause a visible change to that permanent, resolve it immediately. For example, Sleep with Fishes. Just to let you guys know, this is actually a trick example. Sleep with Fishes doesn't work on this rule because Sleep with Fishes has another effect that creates a 1/1 blue fish token. So another example is, the actual example is Water Knot. The effect of the aura has to be only affecting the enchanted permanent. Okay. Fix number 2. If yes, any questions? All right. If the ability is a delay trigger ability that undoes a zone change trigger, the opponent chooses to put it on the stack or wait till the start of next phase. For example, Yorion. Yorion's delay trigger ability to return those cards to the battlefield at the beginning next end step. It falls in this category, in this fix. Anyone knows why? Anyone? All right. I'll show. Do you know why the Yorian's third ability, the delay trigger ability, falls into this category for zone change? The Unduster zone change. I'll just show you guys an example. Okay, let's say you cast your opponent casts Yorion, exile a Llanowar Elves, then say go, and then you attack with the Hullbreaker Horror, hoping that Yorion blocks it. Before the blocker, your opponent says, "Oh wait, I forgot returning the elf." Right. So this is why we ask the player whether the opponent wants to put it on the stack now, or the beginning of next phase, so they won't have a surprise blocker. Okay, the reason is you do fix 2 is so there's no surprise blocker. All right, fix number 3. If the trigger ability already passed for a whole turn, or the effect already expired, you don't have to say anything to the player, just let them continue playing. For example, Attended Socialite. Let's say 2 creatures enters the battlefield after that, and then the player says go. And the next combat, he says, "Oh, hey, I forgot to the effect of giving it a +2/+2. Oops." And then if it's already expired, right? It says until end of turn. So you just, if the player call a judge, just tell them, "Oh yeah, just continue with the game." Okay, for anything else that's not covered on fixed 1, 2, 3, ask the opponent whether the trigger ability is added on, if he wants to put the trigger ability on the stack. If it is, if the opponent chooses to put on a stack, when you resolve it, remember to use only legal choices. Let's say if any mana payment, only mana payment during the condition when it's supposed to trigger. Any question for the fixes? Any questions? Anyone? Remember that triggerability is the controller responsibility. Usually no penalty. If it's detrimental, it gets upgraded into warning. Remember to show awareness that the trigger triggers if the player doesn't show doesn't aware the trigger triggers. Oops. The fix, there are 4 fixes, 1 aura, 1 Unduster zone change trigger, 1 is the expired one, and something else. Okay. No questions? All right, let's try with some scenarios. Remember, this is based on competitive realm, so don't do any of these for the FNMs. Case number 1. Alice is attacking with a Ganjo's exemplar. So I block it with a goblin token. Alice says yours dies, but I said it's supposed to be a trade, right? Yours is 2/1. So because there's a disagreement, so I call a judge. Judge, what would you do? Any penalty? If you need the mic, please let me know. Alice says yours dies, but I said it's a trade. Trade means both dies. Alice doesn't communicate well. Miss Trigger count as a 2-1. Alice doesn't need to verbally announce the trigger, so it's a trade. So that's it. That she knows her samurai will. Alice demonstrated that she knows her samurai will survive. Yes, he says, yours dice. So what do you guys do as a judge? Like, you know, there has to be some solutions, right? Yep, Alfred is correct. So the trigger is assumed to have happened until life total change, or Alice says Eikanjo exemplar 3-2. If Alice says yours dies, mine doesn't, then Alice acknowledges her trigger, sorry. Let me go back the reason. Okay. So if it affects the game state in a non-visible way, tell your opponent. So this is why. So during this place, if a judge call in here, and if Alice insists that hers doesn't die, I will take Alice side, and it's not Miss Trigger. And the goblin dies. Only the goblin dies. Anyone disagree with me? When a trigger triggers, it's player assume this is not like in Arena when it triggers, it shows on your screen that the ability triggers. Remember, there's ability is invincible, so you don't actually see it. So we assume that the player remembers until it affects the game state. In this case, the goblin deals 1 damage. The Eikanjo exemplar is a 3-2, and it survives. Okay, is that clear? Case. Let's start with case number 2. At the end of Alice's 10th turn, Tom casts Summoner Pact, and then Alice casts the blue castle, and then Tom draws a card, casts a thing twice, draws a card, and then he forgets, and then 2 turns later, when Alice drawing her card for the turn, Alice realized that Tom did not pay the upkeep for the Summoner Pact, and calls a judge. Judge, what would you do? What's the infraction? What is the fix? The one who casts Summoner Pact is Tom, not Alice. Miss Trigger, Alice gets a choice to put the trigger back on the stack. Failure to maintain game state, warning to Tom. Game continues. Okay, a bit heads up for FTMGS. FTMGS, we only give out to a player when we give the other players a warning for GRV. So we don't just give people out. We don't hand people out the FTMGS. Investigate Tom. Yes. When there's a judge call, we investigate Tom. But Tom seems that he forgets. So he says, "Oh, oops, I'm sorry. This is my first time playing the game, playing the deck. what would you do? Alice is not required to remember Tom's mistrigger. She's not. Not required to remember Tom's mistrigger. Yep. Trigger has expired. And she should not be penalized. We don't penalize Alice. Would you penalize Tom? I remember this happened with Blue Pack. Yes, two turns have passed. Trigger has expired. If things haven't changed, it is put on the stack. The assumptions that the cost isn't paid. All right. I probably should. If you have a headache, have fun. Then you're thinking. Then I hope you're having fun. Then you'll be. All right. Let me give out the okay. The fix. If the ability already passed for one whole turn, instruct the player to continue playing. See that? So the key point in here is that the ability already passed 2 turns, and we don't find Tom trying to cheat. He honestly forgets. So you don't ask the opponent to put it on the stack because it already passed 2 turns. Yes, we give Tom for forgetting his detrimental trigger, so it's upgraded into its mistrigger. It's upgraded into a warning, but we don't fix because it's already expired 2 turns. Okay. All right. Next one. If you have any question, feel free to stop me anytime. I have like 6 cases, so I don't want to go too far if you have any question on the previous things. All right, let's say AP attacks with BMT, Black Market Tycoon. NAP blocks with it while having a Glorious Sunrise on his battlefield. NAP blocks with a 2/2 cat. AP says, oh, yours dies. Mine is a 3/3 trample. NAP says, oh, you forgot the trigger. So they decided to call a judge. Judge, what would you do if you're the floor judge? My take. Miss trigger, AP forgot to choose one of the modes, no fix necessary, BMT trades with the 2/2 cat. Wow, nice one. It is. Remember, Glorious Sunrise has modes. So AP has actually says, my creature get +1/+1 and trample. So you cannot just use the shortcut that, oh, here, it's auto remembered. Okay, so one way to show awareness for anything that has mode or target, you have to actually say this target for what, or I choose this mode, or this happens. Okay, so remember that is it mistrigger? Do we give out a warning for this? Because it's mistrigger. All right, so basically you don't have to say it's mistrigger, so because it's no warning, you don't have to track it. Yes, it's beneficial for the AP, so no penalty. You don't have to write down the mistrigger, and no fix. The Black Market Tycoon trades with the 2/2 cat and tell him to continue playing. All right. Case number 4. AP casts 3 gathering Tjong in a row. I mean, 1 and then search for 1 and then cast another 1, search for 1, cast another 1, and then put 3 counters on Thalia Lieutenant. And then NAP says, hey, you forgot the trigger. NAP calls a judge. Judge! What do you do as a floor judge? Would you just avoid the judge call? A similar scenario actually happens during one of the GPs that I went to. So this is actually quite common. It's similar. It's not 100% same, but it's quite similar. So if you judge on Comrail, this is will be one of the reasons you have to try. So try it. By the way, if there's infraction, and what's the fix also? AP is doing his action as shortcut. No fix, game continues, no infraction. No infraction, AP is just taking a shortcut. Anyone else? Anyone disagree with them, with those two answers? And say AP only gets 1 counter? Shortcuts taken, but even I think it's a bit too fast. It's still a valid move, no infraction, no fix. Kenji says 1 counter. No infraction, out of sequence trigger, but AP did not forget the trigger. Out of order sequence, no infraction, no fix. No penalty, reverse the counter putting, carry on with the search for library sequence. Cause the previous 2, consider miss. Anyone else? All right. Trying to. Okay. Personally, I will call this out of order sequence. So it's not considered miss. First, does AP forget putting the counter? Anyone helps him remember the cards? He actually remembers, he just put it on a whole batch of work, right? Second, if he does it, is there any an opportunity? Does he get any benefit for doing that? If not, if the effect the same, then I'll rule out as out of order sequence, which means there's no infraction. He actually remembers that he's just doing it like not in that order, but the effect is there. So no fix, out of order sequence, no infraction. That's me personally, though. If you want, we can discuss on out of order sequence after the session. All right. Okay, case number 5. AP has Katati War Mage, and AP has Witch Oven. Also, AP has a Darkseal Citadel. It's an artifact land. On NAB turn, he draws a card. Forget paying the Witch Oven upkeep cost. What's the infraction? What's the fix? GRV rewind the game state and put the trigger on the stack. This is tricky. Yes, it is tricky. I try to make all my scenario as easy as possible, but as hard as to give you guys some hard time also too. So I hope that you guys having fun doing these. AP makes trigger. Judge will ask an AP opportunity to put the ability on the stack. NAP miss trigger. Let me ask something. Does NAP's trigger, which offense trigger ability, detrimental? Yes. Infraction is miss trigger, penalty is warning, fix give AP to choose put the trigger. All right, let's just do it this way. Kataki War Mage gives NAP switch often the ability, right? So because it's from Kataki's the trigger ability, so AP has to remind NAP the trigger. So it's not detrimental. So I will not give it a warning, me personally. If it's, well, it's detrimental. Is it beneficial? It is very beneficial. So it gives, because it gives to both players the artifact. Sacrifice this artifact unless you pay one, right? Yep, it's triggering for NAPs. It's triggering from NAPs which often, but the effect is from AP's Kataki. So AP has to remind NAP because the owner of the ability is from Kataki. So, but it's not mistrigger. So just, is it a warning? No, I don't think so. I will not give it a warning. Owner, not control. Yep. So no mistrigger, no fix, because it's detrimental. That's what I think. But for AP it's himself, he has to remember if he has to pay one. This scenario actually similar to is it Tabernacle Vendor Fail, the one that gives our creature pay one life or pay one. So this is actually a symmetrical ability. Any questions so far? Oh, sorry, Tabernacle of Penderfield, yeah. The original Tabernacle. Yeah, it's something similar to Tabernacle. I don't have the cards, so I don't need to remember the card's name. Any questions so far? All right, let's try the last example. AP equip the cement shoes to a 1/1 of goblin token, then do a bunch of things, and then says goes. NAP wants to gain 4 lives, so he attacks with the blacks, hoping that he gains 4 lives. So he attacks. AP blocks with a goblin token. But then, whoops, NAP just remember that he doesn't want to block. So NAP call a judge. I mean, NAP just remember that black's supposed to be tapped. NAP calls a judge. Judge! What's the infraction? What's the fix? Remember that AP already blocks with a goblin token. Anyone? I'll take it back if I can. I'll reverse it in a turn, like one phase. Maybe. Smash says equip creature has at the beginning of the end step tap this creature. If there's a way, there were a way to attach this to opponent creatures to trigger generate detrimental. Most cases, if one of your creatures is turned, it needs constantly equipping. Yep, it is. Anyone? Okay, I'll just close it. Okay, so because IP already blocks with the Goblin token, there's no turning back. IP mistriggers and FTMGS. And it puts cement shoes trigger on the stack, no warning issues. FTMGS only works if you give out GRV. So if you give a player GRV, the other player, you can give it either GRV or FTMGS. So you don't just give out mistrigger and FTMGS. All right, so AP already blocks with the Goblin token, right? Remember the fix for getting these, tap it. So it's already tap, block. Okay, so, and AP gets a warning for getting a detrimental trigger. Okay. That's it. Any questions?
So I think they want you to say the K6 solution again. And can you speak louder?
Okay, so for K6, wait. I think I make a mistake in here. Sorry about the K6. This is actually, you are supposed to ask the opponent if the trigger is tap it, but we don't go back on these. So either way, if the Goblin gets tapped, it's still already blocked. But it's also a warning for missing detrimental trigger. Sorry, this is not actually, this is not the regular fix. So the fix is ask the opponent if he wants to tap the creature, but it's already blocked, so it gets blocked still. We don't go back on this case. It's mistrigger with warning. Okay. Nope, no go back before blocking. Remember that this is mistrigger. We don't do backup on mistrigger. One of the reasons is we don't want any the game state is actually already broken, so the attacking creature could die. Yes. NAP wants to the black die, so he can gain 4 life, right? Any other questions? Just remember there are 4 fixes if it's from Aura or undoes phone change or expired. If it's not, ask the opponent. So the attacking creature could die. Yes, it's already get blocked by a 4/4 Goblin. All right. Any questions? Any question about miss trigger?
Yep. So anyone else have any questions for Sugeng? When do you want to try your pet question that Fong was talking about? Yep, Sugeng, can you go back to the miss trigger for pet?
Hack. Yep.
Yep.
Oh, oops. I guess FTMGS can apply for any GPE, so miss trigger also can get one then. Sorry about that. My mistake. What was your answer again for this scenario? It's already a 2-turn pass. If the investigation doesn't show Tom any intention to cheat, I'll say it's already expired, so we don't trigger it again. So no, it's miss trigger with warning but no fix.
Close one. Not tight enough. It's not screwed like this. Okay, keep everything inside. You make it all inside. Then you can close.
Any triggerability that missed prior to current phase in the previous turn instruct players to continue playing. Because I said that it's 2 turns already passed. If it's like draw step or the upkeep of the next turn, sure, I will categorize it on fix 4 on asking the opponent if triggers again. It's still a warning because it's a detrimental trigger, but it just doesn't do anything, I guess. Does that answer your question, Vern? A similar case for the Summoner's Pack, actually, Pack of Negation, I think. Okay. Any other questions? It's already past 2 turns, Warren. So I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't remember the old IPG. I was still I was inexperienced, I guess, at that time. Any other questions? At that time, yes. At that time, yes. That's the old pack. You just lose the game. But I think that was a while back. I have no idea. I wasn't a level 2 at the time, so I can't. No comment, man. This was they're handling mistrigger with default action. I think there's one, I think.
Okay, sorry. So I guess it's also the same Ravnica allegiance policy change. So actually, one you're correct. This kind of miss triggers, they do not expire. So if you miss a trigger with a default option, your opponent decides if it goes onto the stack. And if it does, because your opponent decides that it goes on the stack, you make all the appropriate choices.
So you can actually pay for that, right?
When we go onto the stack, then you have a choice, to pay or lose the game.
Yeah. So there's actually a chance to pay for that.
So yes, I think a lot of people will, they will say, hey, it's unfair, and then it's tough. And of course, I think Fong also added something interesting, where the opponent of the player of the pack. So I cast Summoner's Pact, and then my opponent say one basically waits until I tap my mana to cast something else, and I call a judge and hey, CJ forgets to pay for his pack.
That's actually a good way to win, though.
So I mean, it all goes back to the IPG then, and we will follow exactly what it is. Maybe one you can chime in.
Until you have used up your mana and call for mistrigger here. Yep. Yes, Chris, yes, you can do that.
Yeah, so I was looking back at the current IPG, so of course I didn't really have time to look through everything as far as the mistriggered section is concerned. But I don't recall there having been a change. That's why I was asking about this again, because the last that I remember is like what CJ said during the Ravnica allegiance policy change, where they okay, in the past, yes, if you forgot a trigger that had a default action, so like do this, otherwise that, then we always assume that the default action happens. So in the case of Summoner's Pact or Pact of Negation, etc., then because you did not pay during the upkeep, the default action, you're assumed to have chosen the default. As if you don't, so you just lose the game. So in 2019, we removed that because it was confusing, for one thing. Basically because there were various different ways of wording default actions. So some say if you don't, some say if you do, so it caused confusion as to what would actually happen. And the decision then was to say that, okay, for triggered abilities with default actions, we no longer enforce the default action. Instead, we allow the opponent to choose to put the triggered ability on the stack, and then the player has to then make choices when that triggered ability resolves. Which means, yes, like what Chris mentioned, yeah, you can strategically pick when you want to bring up this issue of the mistrigger. So yeah, you could do it when your opponent has tapped out and is unable to pay. And with regards to the question of isn't this unfair? Well, not really, because in the past that player would have automatically lost anyway. So there isn't any element of unfairness in that sense. The interesting thing is that my quick reading of the IPG now, I couldn't really find that clause specifically. It helps me reach this conclusion. So I will need to again put some oil back inside my IPG brain and remove some of the rust. But I remember that to be the case. So that's why I was hoping someone else would be able to point out exactly where in the IPG this particular interpretation of how we handle this sort of mistriggers is found. I probably will find it later, but right now I couldn't find it. But I remember exactly like this, like what CJ was saying. This is how it was. So unless I can find it, because as you know, the mistrigger section as well is pretty long. There's a lot of words there, and well, we'll try and find it again. I'm sure.
All of us are rusty. Yeah, not just
so
you.
It's not this particular section that you've highlighted. Okay, so it's not if the triggered ability created an effect whose duration has expired, because well, it doesn't actually have a duration. Okay, this isn't an effect that has a duration. An effect that has a duration is this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. The duration being until end of turn. Okay, so the missing pact payment, the pact trigger ability, it's actually just a delayed trigger ability. It doesn't actually have a duration. It just triggers at the beginning of that player's next upkeep. So yeah, I was trying to look for the correct section in the mistriggered IPG to find that particular clause, but I haven't been able to do it yet. So, is there anything on the annotated IPG?
Yes, there's one. I just don't remember which part. I remember there's one. Do you mind waiting for a moment?
I'm good. Maybe CJ remembers any other level 3 or level 2.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you guys again. Okay. So Sugeng, I think this one let's if you can, maybe perhaps later you can do a final announcement to everyone where to tell them, to figure out this one. It's already 6:50. So CJ, can you take over?
Yep, okay. So yes, before you go, there's actually, I think there's a default action under the upgrade section on the mistrigger. So I think later Sugeng can go and check out on it. So basically, now I will just share my screen for the final portion, which is the QR code for the quiz. I will also share the link to the quiz in the chat. One moment. The quiz and the feedback form. Oh yeah, Tom just did it. So long story short, you will need to have at least one constructive feedback on one of the presentation. So that's basically what you like, what you don't like, and what you think the presenter can improve on the things that you do not like. And then of course there's also the quiz. You need to get 80%, and I think the deadline will be on the coming Friday on the 3rd of June. Yeah, but you can try as many times as you want, all the way until the 3rd of June. Then after that, Tommy will be marking it. He's a professor anyway. And he'll release the results on the 4th of June. Yeah, the quiz link is right there. And of course, the wifey memes. No? You will always lose to your Asian wife. All right, I think that's all for today. Thank you for joining the conference. And I will see you next time.